Chapter 630. Zwichyo. Ling Han smiled and casually made up a story, saying, "That guy suddenly got on his coachman and decided to elope, so he asked me to attend the banquet in his place." The old butler was astounded. He'd seen Zwichyo Licheng a few times, and every time he came for his young lady, earnestly pursuing her. Why did he suddenly get on his coachman? Could it be that the young lady was too cold when she refused, causing Zwichyo Licheng to suffer too much of a shock, twisting his outlook on life and bending him? "May I ask young master's name?" he asked. Anyway, his duty was to welcome guests, and whoever came in this carriage had the right to enter the courtyard. This was a rule he had to abide by. Han Lin. Ling Han once again used this fake name. He did not care whether he would be exposed or not. "So it's young Master Han, please." The old butler made an inviting gesture, and a sturdy man immediately came up to lead Ling Han and the others in. Slowly, Zwichyo Licheng and his coachman ran over together. Because they were injured by Ling Han, they supported each other and went up, and very intimate. Could it be true the two of them really bent together? The old butler couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He'd heard that some men liked that, but never thought he'd see it with his own eyes, making his old face twist involuntarily. He even took a few steps back, as if afraid of being infected. "Young Master Zwichyo?" he asked after retreating to a safe distance. "That person took my carriage. Stop him. Don't let this madman in. He's definitely here to cause trouble." Zwichyo Licheng wasn't Ling Han's match, so he could only pin his hopes on the old butler. This was a spiritual infant tier elite, and who knew how many years ago he'd stepped into this tier. Although he didn't advance into the deity transformation tier, he tempered this tier to an extremely solid state, and his battle prowess was terrifying. The old butler gave an "oh" and looked towards Ling Han, revealing a sinister expression, and said, "Young Master Han, is there any falsehood in young Master Zwichyo's words?" Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "It's completely untrue. How could such a young and promising, humble and courteous young man like me possibly be a madman? I want to sue him for slander, and I hope that senior can uphold justice." This Zwichyo Licheng was so angry that he almost vomited blood. "You're still being humble and polite?" He pointed to the injuries on his body and said, "Aren't these caused by you?" The coachman hurriedly nodded and leaned on Zwichyo Licheng's chest with an aggrieved expression. He was like a helpless little bird, extremely aggrieved. "Damn, I'm going to go blind." Not even the old butler dared to witness such a scene. He hurriedly turned his head and said to Ling Han, "Young Master Han, rules are rules. Since young Master Zwichyo said he didn't ask you to attend the banquet on his behalf, then please show me your invitation. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to chase you away." How could a country bumpkin receive an invitation? He must be trying to sneak in. Zwichyo Licheng discredited Ling Han. Ta, 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 another carriage came over and stopped. A man with an imposing appearance walked out, and beside him was a beautiful woman. The two of them didn't look like a couple, but more like brother and sister. "Hey, isn't this Zwichyo? Haha. Why is he so miserable?" That man was first taken aback, and then asked curiously. What Zwichyo Licheng feared the most right now was to have his scars poked open. Hearing this, he only snorted coldly and said, "Don't mind your own business. Don't you know that I, Li Fengyu, like to meddle in other people's business the most?" That man laughed loudly and called out to the beauty beside him, saying, "Sister, let's get a stool and some melon seeds. We'll play while we munch." "Brother." That beauty glared at him. Her appearance was moving and incomparably bright and beautiful. He really didn't know what to do with this brother. He was never proper all day long. Also, "Zwichyo, you're hugging this person so tightly. Could it be that there's some unspeakable relationship between the two of you?" Li Fengyu looked at the coachman leaning on Zwichyo Licheng's chest, and his face was instantly filled with shock. Zwichyo Licheng was taken aback at first, then realized that the coachman was actually leaning on his chest. It instantly made him feel disgusted, and he hurriedly pushed the other away with a look of disgust. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Truly heartless when plucking a bird, deeply disdainful." So Zhuqiu actually has this kind of hobby, and in order to hide it, he purposely neglected, his lover in front of others. Li Fengyu was taken aback. The old butler's throat trembled, and he wanted to vomit. The young geniuses of this generation appeared like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, and each was stronger than the last. But it was too messy, even playing with this kind of style. You! Zhuqiu Lucheng roared angrily. I'll kill you! I'll kill you! Ling Han deliberately sighed and said his secret was exposed, and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. Sigh, in reality, this isn't much. Everyone has the right to like others. As long as you like them, why do you need to care about the views of the world? And then, Li Fengyu expressed his deep agreement. Zhuqiu Lucheng, on the other hand, was trembling with anger. He wasn't gay at all. He still wanted to pursue the Wang family's pearl, but if news spread that he was messing around with men, then would he still have any hope? This brother, let's go together and have a good chat. Li Fengyu's face was full of gossip. The content of this good chat was definitely Zhuqiu Lucheng and the coachman's unspeakable secret. Ling Han took out the invitation and handed it to the old butler. He walked towards Li Fengyu and said with a smile, "Sure. Don't say it." Zhuqiu Lucheng hurriedly shouted, "Don't say anything." Ling Han turned around and said, "Don't say anything between me and him." Zhuqiu Lucheng didn't even think and immediately shouted. Ling Han nodded and said, "Don't worry, I won't say it. I don't like to talk about other people's secrets behind their backs the most." Li Fengyu immediately made an "oh" sound. This time, it was really confirmed. Zhuqiu Lucheng admitted it himself. The old butler wanted to vomit again. No. Zhuqiu Lucheng only reacted after staring blankly. This originally wasn't a big deal, but being argued like this was instead admitting his identity as a gay, and he immediately cried out. "No need to say it, I understand." Li Fengyu nodded solemnly and said, "Zhuqiu, don't worry, your secret is with me. I definitely won't tell a third person." "Like hell I'll believe you. The smile on your face is almost uncontrollable. Also, who doesn't know your nickname? Big Mouth Fleas? Of course you won't tell a third person, but 300 people, 3,000 people." Zhuqiu Lucheng hurriedly chased after him. No matter what, he had to stop Li Fengyu's nonsense. However, he had just caught up 2 steps when he felt his legs go soft, and his figure immediately fell towards the ground. "Young masters." The coachman hurriedly pounced over and hugged Zhuqiu Lucheng. Li Fengyu, the hero saving the damsel in distress, saw this. Dirty, really too dirty. However, the expression on his face was as excited as it could be. Li Big Mouth's attribute was already burning fiercely. The old butler couldn't help it and vomited with a wah. Young people nowadays were really incomprehensible. Chapter 631. The attack of dead souls had a certain damaging effect on the divine sense. After all, these female soldiers were extremely powerful when they were alive, and definitely far surpassed Ling Han. After death, they could still leave a mark in the world because their obsession did not dissipate. This was really very hard to imagine. It should be known that this large ship had crashed out from the void, and the void also had a strangling effect on the divine sense, but they appeared perfectly. These people were definitely immortals when they were alive. The impact Ling Han received was a little big. In the traditional understanding of martial artists, immortals represented something like indestructible and immortal, existing for eternity. But now, a divine ship had suffered great damage, and the immortals on it had all been killed. The so-called realm of immortals should only be the lower realm that had a higher level of martial arts. There were slightly more elites there, and they lived slightly longer. Their territory was slightly larger, and they had slightly more resources. However, they were not gods in the true sense of the word, being omnipotent and immortal. The 5 female soldiers all screamed and attacked, not only at Ling Han, but also at the others. Although they no longer had powerful strength, they still had a cutting effect on the divine sense. Ling Han could hold on for 8 to 10 years, but it did not mean that others could do the same. Elites of the Shattering Void tier were naturally fearless, especially those who had formed the heart of martial arts. Their divine sense was firm, but below the shattering void tier, as long as they had not formed the heart of martial arts, their faces would all turn pale, and they would feel extremely uncomfortable. Their divine sense was being torn apart by these dead souls, giving them a splitting headache. However, there could be a shocking treasure hidden inside the ship, and no one wanted to retreat at this time. Even if they could not obtain it themselves, they still wanted to take a look. This was an irresistible temptation for them. Moreover, fated chances were not something that could be obtained with strength alone. Otherwise, how could there be so many people searching for treasures in mystery realms? When there was someone stronger than them, they would have no choice but to retreat. Deity transformation tier cultivator suddenly fell headfirst and did not get up again.
Dead.
The divine sense was destroyed, and the physical body was naturally an empty shell that would slowly decay. This was obviously a member of the 5 sects and was a veteran deity transformation tier cultivator. In the outside world, he could be considered an elite, but now, he had died so silently. In fact, someone only stored his corpse into a spatial spirit tool and did not even bother to bring him out for a proper burial. Pa. Under the onslaught of the dead souls of the female soldiers, there were still people who fell one after another. They were all in the deity transformation tier and the flower blossom tier. Martial artists with lower cultivation levels did not have the right to enter. Those below the heaven tier, get out, the Sword Emperor said sternly. He had formed Sword Heart, and this shout went straight into their souls, instantly clearing the eyes of many people who had been blinded by greed. They woke up from their intense greed and hurriedly retreated. If he didn't even have the qualifications to establish a foothold here, how could he talk about fortuitous encounters? Even so, the heaven tier cultivators were still a bit strained, feeling so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit. However, their divine sense would not be destroyed by the dead souls in a short period of time, and it was enough to support them to search through this large ship. They all searched one cabin after another. If a secret treasure appeared ahead, they did not have the right to compete with Ma Duo Bao and the other elites. This was the task of Zhuo Qifeng and the other elites. Ling Han and Ma Duo Bao walked side by side. There were only 5 dead souls of the female soldiers patrolling the bottom level, but judging from the number of cabins, the number of soldiers should far exceed this number. Only 5 dead souls of the female soldiers came out. Was it because the 5 of them were stronger, or were the dead souls of the others in other places? With this question in mind, they arrived at the second last level. This place was still divided into cabins, and judging from the size and layout, it was also used as a resting room for people, but like the lower level, there was only emptiness left here. As they walked, they encountered the dead souls of the 5-man team of female soldiers. This was also the existence that scared the others out of the ship, but this time, no one was afraid, and continued to advance amidst the onslaught of the female soldiers. Although the ship was large, how long would it take for everyone to walk one round? They entered the third last level. This level was still the resting room, but it was obviously much more luxurious. Every room was bigger than the one below, and only those with higher status would have the right to stay here. If there were soldiers, then there would definitely be officials. There were more female soldiers patrolling here, at least 7 teams. Added with the 2 teams from before, there were about 50 dead souls continuously attacking. This was something that even heaven-tier elites could not bear. Those who had not formed the heart of martial arts were completely unable to resist, and they all held their heads and screamed in pain. Ling Han had long since stored Zhu Xian'er, rabbit, and gold-seeking rat into the Black Tower. Hu Niu was freakish, so she was naturally unafraid, and he himself had formed the heart of the sword, so he was also unafraid. The 5 sects were in a miserable state. In such a short period of time, they suffered heavy casualties, and the heaven-tier elite spirits were similarly destroyed, becoming warm, living corpses. This, however, made the 9th underworld king and the others' gazes burn with desire, almost drooling. This was the freshest material for refining corpses, and it still carried heat. If they were refined into corpse soldiers on the spot, they would definitely be able to unleash their maximum power. They even set their sights on shattering void tier elites who could be refined into corpse kings. Even though they were now allies, the people of the five sects felt their blood run cold from their gazes. They wanted nothing more than to kill these people first, and then consider the matter of searching for treasures. You don't mind if I take these corpses, right? It would be a waste to give them to you, the ninth underworld king finally couldn't help but say. The corpses of heaven tier elites could also be refined into tier 3 gold-armored corpses, which were existences second only to corpse kings. Also, what do you mean by wasting the dead's natural burial? Being humiliated by you guys refining them into corpse soldiers, that's madness. The people of the five sects hurriedly fought to put the corpses away. Since they were no longer alive, they could be stored into spatial rings, so bringing them along wouldn't be too troublesome. They walked until they reached the central region of this floor, where they saw a woman appear in front of them. She was sitting upright, and in front of her was a long table. She was also covered in battle armor, but she was completely different from the other female soldiers. Her battle armor was of a much higher grade, and there was even a cape on her back, giving off a cold divine aura. This was a female general. "Stand down," said the female general. "Yes." The 9 female squads all replied respectfully, and they all withdrew. "So many years have passed, but for you all to still be able to come before I die, it can also be considered a kind of fate." The female general looked at everyone and made an inviting gesture. "I would like to invite you all to tea." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Who would dare to drink tea with a departed spirit? "No one is willing to drink tea with me," the female general said with a smile. Previously, the female soldiers were all stiff and only had the thought of guarding the ship in their minds. This was also the obsession that supported them and did not disperse, but this female general seemed to still have her own consciousness. This was too shocking. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "If Senior does not mind that my cultivation level is too weak, I would be willing to accompany Senior to drink tea and have a chat." Chapter 632. "Hunyo, someone's disturbing our meal. What should we do?" Ling Han said to Hunyo with a smile. "Send them all flying," Hunyo said fiercely. "Then, do you want to exercise?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Okay." Hunyo put down her plate, and seeing everyone staring at her covetously, she couldn't help but say, "You guys want to steal Nyo's food to eat." But on second thought, she smiled and said, "It's not delicious anyway, so it doesn't matter." You don't dare to make a move, so what's the meaning of letting a little girl make a move?" Zhu Xiaotian sneered. "You're really despicable. You're asking for a beating." Hunyo charged out and Xiao, her small figure flashed, already appearing in front of Zhu Xiaotian. She threw a punch, hitting Zhu Xiaotian's face, instantly making his nose bleed. With her attack, everyone was shocked. How could this little girl's speed be so fast? Truly shocking. "Knock you guys down." Hunyo couldn't stop after attacking. Her body turned into lightning, flashing in the crowd. Pa. People were sent flying by her one after another like scarecrows. In just a few breaths' time, the dozen or so flower protectors were all knocked down by Hunyo, lying on the ground and groaning. Jing Shuang's body seemed to be sealed in ice. She definitely didn't think that this little girl would be so strong, instantly knocking down her pursuers. Although her pursuers definitely weren't limited to this number, the strongest ones were only these few, or else she wouldn't be qualified to receive an invitation to come here. Freak, what was this little girl's background? With such a huge commotion, the others had naturally arrived as well. Many of them were surprised, while some revealed looks of interest. "So, young Master Ling has arrived." A woman walked over with graceful steps, her figure graceful. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, her skin like white jade, and her black hair was like a waterfall, shining brightly and extremely beautiful. She walked over from afar, and the people on the road all moved to the sides to let her through, their faces filled with fanaticism and infatuation. This was a beauty that was a level higher than Jing Shuang. Ling Han walked towards her and said, "You are." The woman smiled faintly, like 100 flowers blooming, incomparably bright and beautiful. She said, Gnome Man, also the person who invited you here on behalf of Sister Yun. Ling Han suddenly understood and said, Are you Gnome Shuiyun's elder sister or younger sister? Sister. Gnome Man smiled and said, I invited young Master Ling over because I wanted to discuss with young Master Ling whether you can part with that bottle. Haha, it's just a bottle. Why do you have to invite me here to discuss it? Ling Han said, Are you afraid that I won't have a place to eat? Miss Man is so nice to me. Gnome Man couldn't help but stiffen. She wasn't concerned about Ling Han. She just wanted to use such a gathering to pressure Ling Han. She didn't expect the other party to deliberately misinterpret it, so she didn't know how to defend herself for a moment. Madman, you dare take advantage of Fairy Gnome? Immediately, many people began to berate him. They were all dragons and phoenixes among men. A powerful aura circulated around them, forming a terrifying pressure. You guys dare to be rude to Nyo's Ling Han, who Nyo was instantly enraged. Beat them up, beat them up. Rabbit, on the other hand, wished for the world to be in chaos, waved his little claws and egged them on. Pooh! Many people immediately spluttered. This demonic beast could actually speak. It was too shocking. The scene was a bit chaotic. Gnome Man hurriedly pressed down and said, Everyone calm down. Brother Ling, I'm indeed very interested in that bottle. If Brother Ling can transfer it to me, Man definitely won't disappoint Brother Ling. Oh. Ling Han deliberately looked Gnome Man up and down and said with a smile, Is Gnome Man lacking a son-in-law? Gnome Man's expression instantly darkened. This youngster was really delusional, actually wanting to be Gnome Man's son-in-law. Audacious. Gnome Shuiyan also squeezed out, pointing angrily at Ling Han and said, Who are you, a toad wanting to eat swan meat? The people nearby all laughed loudly. Gnome Man was Gnome Man's beloved daughter, and Gnome Bo Xian, the ancestor of Gnome Man, was even a heaven-grade alchemist, on par with shattering void tier elites. How outstanding of a man did one have to be to marry Gnome Man's daughter? Oh, Gnome Man's daughter is so noble that even Ling Han can't marry her? A voice filled with dominance was heard. Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing arrived together. They were both in the spiritual infant tier and possessed a strong deterrent force. The surrounding people all involuntarily made way. Those who could come here were obviously geniuses among geniuses, but there weren't many in the spiritual infant tier, so how could they possibly stand against Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing's aura? The two great spiritual infant tier warriors stood by Ling Han's side, both crossing their arms in front of their chests, putting on a stance of support. Spiritual infant tier. In the present younger generation, there was temporarily no news of a deity transformation tier freak appearing, so spiritual infant tier was unashamedly the strongest. Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing's battle spread far and wide. Although they had just broken through to the spiritual infant tier, their battle prowess had at least reached 7 or 8 stars, able to battle elites of the older generation. Hee Lady Man, if you marry my brother Ling, I'll give you this piece of Shuechen gold I just obtained as a congratulatory gift, Mu Rongqing said with a smile. With a flick of his hand, he threw out a completely white piece of metal. It wasn't much bigger than a fist, but it made many people stare with wide eyes, revealing a look of greed. Shuechen gold's grade was hard to determine because its use was extremely special. It needed to be refined with other rare metals to greatly increase the hardness of the finished tool, allowing an originally 7th-tier material to withstand the intent of an 8th-tier martial art. The upper limit was 7th tier, and it was impossible to turn an 8th-tier material into a 9th-tier one. Even so, everyone couldn't help but be envious. This piece of Shuechen gold was fist-sized, and if added to 7th-tier rare metals, it was enough to refine an 8th-tier weapon that most people would be satisfied with. Gnome Man's breathing tightened, but her pretty face immediately showed annoyance. She was a dignified descendant of a heaven-grade alchemist, so how could she be bought by a piece of Shuechen gold? Wishful thinking, she reprimanded, feeling extremely insulted. Ling Han sighed, patted Mu Rongqing's shoulder, and said, Mu Rong, it's over for you. I still wanted to help you talk about this marriage, but they won't match your bit of betrothal gift at all. What Mu Rongqing pointed at his own nose, revealing a look of surprise, then immediately shook his head and said, I don't want it. Ling Han laughed and said, then Lady Nong, sorry, my brother isn't interested in you, so pretend I didn't say anything just now. Was it really okay to play people like this? Nong Man's almond-shaped eyes spewed fire, and Jing Shuang's expression wasn't much better. On the other side, Zuoqiu Luqing also invited help and ran over aggressively, surrounding Ling Han and the others. You guys have gone too far. You think you can look down on everyone with two spiritual infant-tier elites? Everyone looked coldly at Ling Han and the others. The ones invited this time were a few top-notch geniuses who obtained direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy. Once they arrived, suppressing Ling Han and the others wouldn't be as easy as turning over a hand. Wing, wung, wung. The sound of a zither suddenly rang out like a celestial sound, instantly calming everyone's anger. Chapter 633. A Beautiful Romance. Everyone looked over at the sound and saw that in the pavilion in the center of the lake, a woman dressed in white had appeared at some point. Her black hair was like clouds, her hair like snow, beautiful to the point of being untainted by the aura of the mortal world. She was playing the zither, her white hands like jade. As she plucked lightly, a beautiful note spread out, intoxicating everyone's mind. This song shouldn't exist in the mortal world. The fish in the lake continuously jumped out of the water and gathered around the pavilion in the center of the lake, extremely cheerful. In the sky, a large number of birds flew over, dancing in the sky like fairies. The sound of the zither turned into talismans and entered the lake, stirring up slight waves, but without any destructive power, making the fish happy and the birds dance. Everyone revealed an intoxicated expression. This woman, this song, should only exist in the heavens. How could it descend into the mortal world? Fairy Yun. What? She's Fairy Yun. Truly devastatingly beautiful. She's actually not the #1 beauty in the middle state. I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. Everyone shook their heads. Wang Yun's appearance was above Lu Yutong's level, but was inferior to Zhu Xian'er's, and added with this breathtakingly beautiful scene, it naturally added endless charm to her. Zhu Xian'er was a bit jealous, and moved close to Ling Han's ear, saying in a low voice, Xian'er also knows how to play the flute. Ling Han looked at her bright red lips, and his heart couldn't help but sway, and he said, all right, play it for me when you're free. Zhu Xian'er nodded, extremely gentle. Everyone, please be friendly. Wang Yun pressed her hands lightly on the zither, but the lingering sound still lingered. Her voice was also gentle and pleasant, ethereal like the dripping of spring water. Yes. Everyone was convinced, nodding in agreement. Ling Han was surprised. This woman was only 23 or 24, but already crossed into the spiritual infant tier. Very extraordinary. As expected of a disciple of an ancient great sect, her tier far surpassed her peers, and no one in the North region could compare. In the other 3 regions, only a few well-known figures, like Mu Rongqing and the others, were qualified to compare. Our sect and the other great sects have divined the mysteries of the heavens and believe that a great disaster will occur soon. Wang Yun continued to speak. The whole place was silent, and only her ethereal voice resounded. Nearly 10,000 years ago, the disaster that caused great destruction to the vast lands will descend once again, and our sect and the other great sects will act just like it did 10,000 years ago, joining hands to face the powerful enemy and plow through the world. However, just in case, we still decided to establish the Restore Heaven Academy to preserve the future hope and kindling as much as possible. Therefore, all of you are the key to reviving martial art in the future. You must not hurt your own people. After she finished speaking, she stood up and walked towards the shore. With every step she took, fishes jumped out of the water to play, and skylarks flew and danced behind her. It was as if a fairy had descended into the world, beautiful to the point where one's heart was pure and refined. Fairy, you are truly kind-hearted. The 5 great sects also have the world in their hearts. If there really is a disaster, only the 5 great sects can protect the world. Benevolence and righteousness. Great merit. Everyone was full of praise. Whether it was sincere or not, who would dare speak ill of the 5 great ancient sects? They were super forces with shattering void tier elites overseeing them, and any one of them could dominate the world. However, the 5 great sects had always guarded their own territory and never had the intention to dominate the world. This couldn't help but be praised by others with thumbs up. Wang Yiyun walked over, smiled sweetly at Gnome Man Man and said, Sister Man Man, don't be angry anymore, okay? For sister's sake, I obviously won't be angry. Gnome Man Man forced out a smile. She'd already said all the great principles, and if she continued to pester her, she'd be looked down upon instead. So, being able to speak eloquently was also a sharp weapon, standing on the moral high ground to criticize, making you feel so depressed that you could only lower your head and say that you were convinced. Brother Ling. Wang Yiyun turned her gaze over again. I heard that you and Sister Man 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 had a conflict because of a spirit tool. How about this? I have a 6th tier treasured tool here, and I'll give it to Brother Ling in exchange for that spirit tool. Everyone revealed a shocked expression. Casually taking out a 6th tier spirit tool to give away, what great boldness, and it could also show the Wang family's wealth. Of course, if Gnome Man Man wasn't the descendant of a heaven-grade alchemist, she definitely wouldn't be so generous. Gnome Man Man immediately looked delighted. Actually, she discovered the extraordinariness of that refined celestial bottle, but didn't want to cause a commotion, so she had Gnome Shui Yun act. In the end, a Ling Han appeared out of nowhere and was even richer than them, forcing her to invite Ling Han to attend the banquet and use the atmosphere here to force him to submit. With the Wang family's pearl asking and a 6th tier spirit tool, Ling Han should agree no matter how she thought about it. After all, if he gave Wang Yiyun some face, it would be of great use in the future. There's no need for that. I like that bottle very much. I have no intention of giving it to anyone else. Ling Han immediately refused. What a joke. That stone bowl was a replica of the Heaven Transformation Bowl, which could refine all things and extract their essence. It was even more precious than the Demon Birth Sword, and it was something that could be exchanged for a level 6 spirit tool. His refusal so decisively not only shocked everyone, even Wang Yiyun had not expected it. Her beautiful face revealed an obvious look of surprise, and after being stunned for a moment, she then said, Brother Ling, won't you consider it a little more? No need. Ling Han waved his hand, not giving him any face at all. Ling Han, you're too arrogant. Zhuqiu Luqing took the opportunity to shout. Ling Han had rejected Wang Yiyun's good intentions, which had obviously angered everyone. If he added more fuel to the fire, he would naturally be able to turn Ling Han into a target for everyone. Yes, too arrogant. Fairy Yiyun had good intentions, but you didn't even consider it. Do you really think that you are some big shot? If it weren't for Fairy Yiyun's sake, I would really want to beat him up. Everyone was talking at once. Beauties had a natural advantage, and the more beautiful they were, the more people would neglect the matter itself and be completely affected by their emotions, leaning towards Wang Yiyun. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Hunyo, are you full? I'm barely not hungry. Hunyo stuck out her little head from the pile of food. The things here aren't tasty at all, making Nyo so tired. Everyone was floored. If it wasn't tasty, why did you eat so much? The plates piled up on the side were taller than you, okay? Moreover, you ate so much and still barely weren't hungry. What kind of stomach did you have? All right, let's go back and continue eating, Ling Han said with a smile. All right. Hunyo clapped her hands and said coquettishly as she looked at Wang Yiyun, You're really a failure as a host, making so many disgusting dishes for the guests to eat. AI, Nyo despises you. Fine. Eating so much of her high-level beast meat and still despising her, this little girl was really ruthless. Wang Yiyun, however, wasn't angered in the slightest, and a smile still hung on her pretty face, as if nothing could sway her emotions. However, the people on the side couldn't help it. Are there guests like you? Don't go, stay. Yes, I want to spar with you. That's right. Fighting hurts the harmony, so let's spar. Chapter 634. No one dared to challenge Mu Rongqing and the Rain Emperor, because these two were spiritual infant tier elites, while Chu Hao was only in the flower blossom tier. Everyone was a prodigy of the present age, so who would be afraid in a battle of the same tier? And prodigies were even more conceited, confident that they were invincible in the same tier, so they wouldn't be afraid. If they could force Chu Hao to submit, then Wang Yiyun would definitely look up to them and remember them in her heart. Persimmons obviously had to be picked from the softest. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "You guys really want to spar with me?" "Of course." Those people called out one after another. "If you lose, hand over that bottle." "All right." Ling Han agreed readily. "However, you guys bet with me with empty promises, then what's in it for me if I win? If you want to spar with me, that's fine, but take out treasures no lower than 6 tiers. You think I'm afraid of you?" Instantly, someone took out treasures and placed them on the table. There were spirit medicines, rare metals, and some antiques, all of which were old. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "All right, line up if you want to challenge me. I'll accept all of them, as long as you can take out treasures. Place your bets together. I'll only accept reservations now. Come, come, come. Those who want to challenge put their treasures on the table. Xian Er, go tally it up."
And
Zhu Xian Er nodded gently. How did a proper battle challenge become like child's play? Everyone was young and spirited, and with a beauty in front of them, who was willing to admit defeat. Many people took out their own treasures and threw them on the table. Zhu Xian Er was in charge of screening, lest anyone take out low-tier treasures to fool her. "I'll say this first, the bet is not refundable. You guys can only choose to fight with me or admit defeat without fighting, but there's no refunding of the bet," Ling Han said seriously. He wanted everyone to take out their bets first to prevent others from cowering after seeing his battle prowess. "Humph. You think I'm afraid of you?" the youngsters said with their heads held high. Ling Han looked at the treasures piled high on the table, revealed a smile, and said, "Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else? Only this time, no more after the deadline. If you want to curry favor with the Wang family's young lady, hurry up, there won't be another chance if you miss this one." He even used himself as an advertisement. Wang Yiyun's pretty face was still expressionless, but her slightly clenched 5 fingers showed that at this moment, a flame of anger had risen in her heart. No one else placed any more bets. With so many people taking turns to challenge him, Ling Han would definitely lose. And as long as he lost one round, he would lose the Aquarius bottle. What was the point of challenging him then? Ling Han couldn't help but feel regretful. Was this all he could swindle? He nodded and said, "To save time, those who placed their bets just now, you can all come together." Puff, this guy was really arrogant. One had to know how many people had challenged Ling Han. There were at least 50 people who had challenged him, and these 50 people were not just any random person but rather prodigies of the current age. All of them had broken through to the flower blossom tier, and possessed the ability to challenge those at a higher cultivation level, ranging from 3 or 4 stars to 5 or 6 stars. With so many geniuses ganging up on him, which flower blossom tier cultivator would dare to be careless? Taking turns to fight was already exhausting, not to mention a group fight. All the prodigies wanted to save face. Naturally, none of them wanted to go up. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Since no one dares to go up, then I've won." "Xian Er, collect your bets, let's retreat. You're not allowed to leave." Seeing that Ling Han was about to run, those youngsters were all displeased. Who dared not go up? They just didn't want to gang up on him. Even if they won, they would lose face. Moreover, who should the credit go to? But Ling Han was about to run, and they couldn't hold themselves back anymore. They all jumped out and surrounded Ling Han. "I'll deal with you guys in 3 moves, Ling Han said, smiling. The arrogant youngsters were all furious. their eyes spitting fire. They only felt that Ling Han was really despicable, being able to incite their anger in an instant. Within 3 moves, it's more like we'll defeat you. Less nonsense. There's nothing to say to this kind of arrogant person.
Just beat him down.
All right. At least 20 people attacked at the same time. The intent of martial art spread, and origin power turned into all kinds of weapons, slashing, slicing, and chopping towards Ling Han. All kinds of chi overflowed, and it was shockingly terrifying. Ling Han smiled slightly, and powerful origin power condensed. Lightning flashed on his body, and he casually punched out. Pung, 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 pung. All the origin power weapons shattered at the same time, and all the chi was destroyed. But the lightning didn't stop, spreading towards those people. It was so fast that it was like light. Instantly, figures were sent flying, and then fell down like flowers scattered by heavenly maidens, falling to the ground with paw, 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 paw. More than 20 people were all defeated in 1 move. There are still 2 moves, Ling Han muttered, and he said to the remaining 20 people, all of you have to attack together. Otherwise, with only 2 moves left, I really won't be able to deal with all of you. All around, there was silence. This youngster was so strong. Although none of these 20 or so people had obtained the qualification to enter directly into the Restore Heaven Academy, to be able to receive an invitation to attend the banquet, which one of them wasn't an extraordinary genius. However, over 20 of them were defeated in a single move when they attacked together. So how strong was Ling Han? Unless there was a suppression of a major tier, with such battle prowess, he was definitely the most genius to enter the Restore Heaven Academy directly. The remaining 20 people looked at each other, not daring to attack. Their battle prowess wasn't much stronger than the people lying on the ground, so what if they could withstand 1 move? What was the difference between losing in 2 moves and losing in 3 moves? Suffering a crushing defeat in front of everyone's eyes. Weren't they idiots? Fight my ass. No wonder Ling Han had previously asked them to take out their wagers first. Indeed, after seeing his battle prowess, who would still be foolish enough to bet on such a freak? Only the greatest prodigies who had directly entered the Restore Heaven Academy would be able to match him. Zhu Xian'er smiled faintly and put away all the treasures on the table. Other than robbing, swindling people also seems to be a shortcut to getting rich. Ling Han mumbled to himself, then smiled and said loudly, who else wants to challenge? Everyone was speechless and turned their gazes towards the few geniuses that had the qualification to enter the academy directly. Wang Yiyun's beautiful eyes shone, and she said, with Brother Ling's invincible might, you should have the qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy directly. Ling Han smiled and said, isn't that normal? Like this brother Mu Rongqing, didn't he also not get the qualification? Mu Rongqing pointed at his own nose and said in displeasure, why are you using me to compare again? Just comparing, without asking for your opinion. So please don't interrupt, Ling Han said with a smile, and said to Wang Yiyun, Miss Wang, can we go now? Brother Ling, this time, Yiyun invited everyone here to discuss something. Please sit for a moment, Wang Yiyun said, asking them to stay. The food is so disgusting, I can't sit anymore, Hunyo said, slapping the table, her face full of resentment. When everyone heard this, they all cried injustice for Wang Yiyun. The Wang family definitely put in a lot of effort to arrange this banquet, but from Hunyo's mouth, it became a slight to the guests. It was really a grievance. Chapter 635. That egg was obviously something incredible. Its preciousness was far greater than that of the reincarnation tea, but Hunyo did not change in the slightest, which made Ling Han very puzzled. Amidst this confusion, Ling Han returned to the North region. At this time, the 4 regions had already been unified, and the flag of the Great Ling Empire had been planted there. Following the promulgation of one policy after another that was beneficial to the nation and the people, the hearts of the people were also rapidly unifying. Ling Han gave it a try. Under the condensation of power of the nation, his battle prowess actually reached a shocking 9 stars of shattering void tier. the battle prowess of the Shattering Void tier was too strong. Thus, it could be assumed that it was the addition of power of the nation that had reached 9 stars of Shattering Void tier. Ling Han's own battle prowess was practically negligible, and the reason he could be so strong was because his physique was too strong. If it were another Heaven tier elite, they would at most be able to reach 20 stars of Heaven tier battle prowess with the addition of power of the nation, and could not possibly improve further. Otherwise, their bodies would first collapse. But Ling Han was different. His physique was on the level of level 10 rare metal, and was enough to withstand 9 stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess. And this had almost reached the limit of his physique. No wonder Ma Duo Bao had no intention of expanding his territory and increasing the number of people under his rule. He, too, had a physique on the level of level 10 rare metal, and could at most obtain the addition of 10 stars of battle prowess. Thus, there was no point in him expanding his territory any further. Going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Yet Ling Han did not have such worries. If he charged up to the Shattering Void tier, his physique could still improve further and reach the level of godly metal. Then, what was the limit of power of the nation that he could withstand? 20 stars, 30 stars, 50 stars, perhaps all the willpower of the people in the entire vast lands could be added to his body alone, and there was no need to worry in the slightest that his body would explode. Only then did Ling Han realize the importance of having a strong physique. Combined with the power of the nation, it allowed him to become incomparably powerful. Of course, this was also because he had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which allowed him to possess such a physique. This kind of strength could not be replicated. His current spirit was incomparably powerful, and his mental state had advanced into the Shattering Void tier in advance, allowing him to perfectly control the battle prowess of 9 stars of Shattering Void tier. And in terms of comprehension of martial arts, he was also advancing at a tremendous pace, his speed astonishingly fast. At his level, martial arts was comprehending Tao, and the strength of his spirit and the improvement of his mental state allowed him to have no bottlenecks for breaking through it all. He only needed to continuously increase the accumulation of origin power, and his advancement would naturally be swift. At this rate, it was extremely possible that he would be able to charge into the Shattering Void tier within a year. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing returned with a large group of people. Now that the 5 great sects had been dismantled, the Restore Heaven Academy naturally could no longer be maintained. These people were all elites among elites, geniuses among geniuses. At first, the 5 great sects had planned to bring them to the immortal realm to be hired thugs, which was enough to show that every one of them had extremely great potential and was worth nurturing. What Ling Han lacked the least right now was cultivation resources. The Purple Moon Empire was spreading the truth of the reckoning everywhere, and Ling Han cooperated, announcing the truth to the whole world in the 4 regions, letting everyone know that if they wanted to escape the fate of being refined into a realm pill, the only way was to split open the skies. In the beginning, the majority of people were naturally skeptical. After all, they had been brainwashed by the 5 great sects for over 10,000 years. But as time passed, more and more evidence was laid out, and naturally, more people would choose to believe it. The more united the people's hearts were, the stronger the power of the nation would be. With the Rain Emperor's help, the pressure on Hellion Sun Shui was instantly greatly reduced. He had also been an emperor for many years, and was naturally shrewd and ruthless in handling affairs, not inferior to her. Ma Duo Bao had agreed with him that he would use a year's time to make preparations, and then split open the skies. Thus, Ling Han planned to cultivate properly in this 1 year. If Ma Duo Bao could split open the skies, that would naturally be great, and he would bask in the glory, but if he couldn't, then he would take the lead. This was the only way out for the vast lands. Ling Han prepared to change his cultivation technique after a while. It was not obtained from the sea race, but from the 5 great sections. After all, the cultivation techniques of the sea race were only suitable for the sea race, but after defeating the 5 great sects, Ma Duo Bao very generously allowed Ling Han to enter and choose a cultivation technique, and Ling Han chose an extreme yang technique. This similarly wasn't the most suitable for him, but it was still better than other cultivation techniques. Most importantly, Ling Han only needed to step into the Shattering Void tier, and when he entered into the realm of immortals, there would naturally be immortal realm cultivation techniques for him to cultivate. Thus, if the cultivation speed of the Shattering Void tier was a bit slower, then so be it. There were still some people from the 5 great sects who ran away, but now they had become birds startled by the mere twang of a bowstring and street rats, so how would they dare to stick their heads out? 3 months passed, and everything was extremely peaceful. Meanwhile, Ling Han's cultivation was also skyrocketing, and he had already advanced into the 3rd layer of the heaven tier. His body arts had similarly improved significantly. However, Ling Han believed that if Xiao Miaoyan and the others appeared, then their target would be him. Even if they had eaten a leopard's gall, they wouldn't dare to seek out Ma Duo Bao. Ma Duo Bao was the world's #1 killing formation, and it was definitely a one-way trip, so they could only leave it to the real immortals to deal with. They had already communicated with the 5 great sects of the immortal realm through special channels and reported the matter of the divine ship. They believed that the immortal realm would definitely send someone over. That woman's strength exceeded common sense, and she was definitely a supreme elite in the immortal realm, so how noble would the treasure that she was guarding even in death be? Thus, Ling Han believed that he and Hunyo would become the 5 great sects' main targets. In addition, the 1,000 Corpse sect would probably also become restless. The reason why they hadn't made a move yet was because they didn't know if Ma Duo Bao was deliberately using Ling Han as bait to lure them out. Another month passed, and what was supposed to come finally came. Xiao Miaoyan and Guanyang appeared, and with a sweep of their swords, the defensive barrier formed by the totem immediately collapsed. The 2 of them forced their way in, both of them seething with killing intent. Ling Han, still not coming out? They shouted one after another. If you still don't come out, we'll slaughter everyone in the Imperial City and then slaughter a city every day. Can you just watch as so many people die because of you?
No.
Ling Han stepped out into the air and stood side by side with Xiao Miaoyan and Guanyang. However, there was a confident smile on his face. I'm here. However, the ending won't be as you think, but rather, I'll take you down. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Miaoyan and Guanyang both laughed loudly. They had already ascertained Ma Duo Bao's location, and if the other party wanted to send reinforcements, it would take at least 3 days. 3 days' time was not enough for them to kill a heaven-tier elite a few hundred times. Therefore, they were not in a hurry to make a move, and of course, would not deliberately waste time. Where does your confidence come from? Xiao Miaoyan said coldly, exuding fury. A dignified prodigy of the immortal realm had actually become a street rat after coming to the lower realm and had to hide from place to place. How could she swallow this anger? Now, she wanted to vent her anger on Ling Han. If it were not for him interfering, the Purple Moon Empire would have already lost the bet and would not be able to make a move within 100 years. And with 100 years' time, the 5 sects of the immortal realm should have already set up the passageway for immortals to descend to the lower realm. So, what if it was the world's #1 killing formation? Even if it could not be killed, it could still trap and banish him, making him watch helplessly as all the living beings in this world were refined into pills. Therefore, she hated Ling Han, even more than Ma Duo Bao. Ling Han did not answer, and merely looked into the distance, saying, Azura Demon Emperor, since you've come, why hide from place to place? You're just a puny heaven-tier elite. How did you discover this, Lord? Azura Demon Emperor appeared in the distance, his face filled with puzzlement and surprise. Chapter 636. Facing a real saber ray, and one that was formed from 30 flashes of qi, Ling Han didn't dare to take it head-on. Ray surpassed qi, and it was an absolute suppression. Its edge was extremely sharp, capable of cutting through everything. Even if Ling Han cultivated body of iron sheet, he didn't dare to take it head-on. After all, this battle wasn't a spar, and could very possibly develop into a battle of life and death. He smiled faintly and said, You've improved, but don't tell me I haven't. A flash of lightning flashed on his body, and he instantly disappeared from where he stood, so fast that even the naked eye couldn't catch him. Xianyuan Ziguang revealed a shocked expression. What kind of movement art was this? How could it be so fast? Before he attacked, he already calculated Ling Han's battle prowess and believed that after he condensed Qi into Ray, he could force Ling Han to retreat step by step, not even having the strength to parry. However, he never thought that after a few months, Ling Han's movement art would actually have a qualitative improvement. As expected, he wasn't the only one who improved. It's more than enough to kill you. Xianyuan Ziguang sneered, drawing his saber and slashing. This time, Saber Ray was resplendent, as long as 300 meters, and turned into a waterfall that swept towards Ling Han. Is that so? Ling Han turned into a flash of lightning, and with a demon fairy step, he was as slippery as a fish, agile and free. He used his left arm as a bow, and his right hand pulled. Wung instantly, an arrow of origin power condensed. It was lustrous white, yet emitted a shocking chill. Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow.
Go.
He shouted lightly, and the origin power arrow shot out. Xiao, it arrived at Xianyuan Ziguang's chest in a flash. Don't say it was just one arrow, but it fused 3 mystical powers. The Eye of Truth broke through the weakest part of Xianyuan Ziguang's defense, and then activated the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. He then accelerated with the power of lightning, making this arrow extremely fast, and at the same time, pierced towards the most difficult part of Xianyuan Ziguang's defense. Xianyuan Ziguang turned pale with fright, and immediately activated the power of bloodline. Endless flames gushed out from his body, and he instantly crossed the level of the flower blossom tier, reaching the spiritual infant tier. True dragon, true phoenix, and other ancient divine beasts roared around him, as if the son of a god had descended, possessing the supreme presence of a king. Puff the arrow arrived, but it didn't pierce through Xianyuan Ziguang's chest. Not even blood spurted out. It merely tore apart the clothes on his chest, revealing a set of navy blue armor. It was currently emitting a brilliant radiance as it forcibly refined the arrow of origin power. Ha 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 ha, I bear the mandate of heaven, and can pick up treasures on the road. Since I've received the mandate of heaven, how could I lose to you? Xianyuan Ziguang laughed wildly. With a wave of his right hand, 36 treasured sabers of various shapes flew out and surrounded Ling Han. Tiangang Annihilation Blade Formation. He shouted. Here we go again. Every time you use a move, you have to announce the next move. How annoying, said Ling Han. But he didn't dare to show any carelessness on his face. This blade formation was extremely terrifying and had the ability to threaten him. Tell me the whereabouts of Helian Sun Shui, or else I'll definitely kill you. Xianyuan Ziguang controlled the saber formation and did not immediately unleash its might, merely staring coldly at Ling Han. What's wrong with you? Ling Han disdainfully refused. He drew out his long sword and activated the Desolate Hell Sword, resisting the terrifying saber intent. You're asking for trouble, Xianyuan Ziguang said coldly, activating the saber formation and charging towards Ling Han. Ling Han brandished his sword to meet the attack, but Xianyuan Ziguang was really strong. Under the slash of saber ray, the saber formation was full of sharp rays, and each ray was enough to pose a fatal threat to flower blossom tier cultivators. No, even spiritual infant tier cultivators would tremble. That was saber ray, and its destructive power was too shocking. There was a huge gap between Qi and Ray, just like Flower Blossom tier and Spiritual Infant tier. This was a qualitative difference. It was very difficult for Ling Han to defend. Fortunately, he was not only agile, but his defense was also very shocking. Firstly, he had origin power to form a defense, and next, he had a 6th-tier rare metal-level physique. Even if these two were broken, he still had the indestructible Heaven Scroll circulating inside his body, which could instantly heal most of his injuries. Taking a step back, he still had 6 drops of indestructible true fluid, which was enough to bring him back to life several times. Saber Ray slashed, and Ling Han was in a very sorry state. These 36 sabers should be a set that belonged to some great elite in the ancient times, but somehow fell into Xianyuan Ziguang's hands. Just as this guy said, being able to cultivate treasures even when he went out meant that he was born with a good fate. Fuck, do you think you're the only one with treasures? Ling Han snorted and said, scrap metal. Wait for me to collect them all. Keep bragging. Xianyuan Ziguang sneered. Hurry up and tell me Helian Sun Shue's whereabouts. He could be considered a sentimental person. Helian Sun Shue obviously didn't pay much attention to him, but his feelings were very deep. Ling Han flipped his right hand and unleashed the Heaven Transformation Bowl. Collect. He activated the treasure, and instantly, vein-like patterns intertwined. Wung. The stone bowl immediately rose into the air, emitting endless light. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Immediately, 3 treasured sabers were collected inside.
What?
Everyone was speechless. The might of the saber formation was obvious to all, but this stone bowl that Ling Han unleashed could actually destroy the saber formation and collect the treasured sabers. It was truly unacceptable. Xianyuan Ziguang was even more dumbfounded. He was the clearest about the might of the 36 treasured sabers, and after being collected by the stone bowl, he also completely lost contact with the 3 treasured sabers, as if they had disappeared from this world. Xiao, xiao, xiao. The stone bowl didn't have any emotions, and continued to absorb the treasured sabers. In just a few breaths' time, another 7 sabers were collected inside. This is... Nong Man's beautiful eyes lit up. She recognized that this was the bottom of that refined celestial bottle, which was also the thing in her hand. She didn't think that it was actually a stone bowl, and so powerful. She wanted it even more. Wang Yun's phoenix eyes also narrowed slightly, thinking that if senior brother Lang could obtain this treasure, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. So what if it was small Saber King, Yao Huiyu, and Dongling? They would only be swept aside by senior brother Lang. However, how is she going to obtain this treasure? Ling Han was unmoved by force or persuasion, and wasn't easy to deal with. Xianyuan Ziguang hardened his heart, and shouted, explode! Wung! The remaining 26 treasured sabers simultaneously emitted a dazzling light, and the vein-like patterns on the bodies of the sabers spread out like a spider web, instantly obliterating them. Spiritual weapons self-destruct. Ling Han was aghast. What kind of spirit tool could self-destruct? It had to have nurtured a spirit tool. However, since it had nurtured an artifact spirit, it would be like a normal living being, placing survival as its top priority. Unless it had no other choice, it would definitely not self-destruct. For example, the Black Tower. If Ling Han wanted the small tower to self-destruct, would the small tower care about him? But under Xianyuan Ziguang's command, these spirit tools all chose to self-detonate at the same time, as if he was the king of spirit tools. Once his command was given, it could not be refused. Fuck, these spirit tools were all level 7 items, and in Xianyuan Ziguang's hands, they couldn't display the standard they should have, but once they self-detonated, 26 high-level spiritual infant-tier elites would explode with full power together, blasting out a great move that would perish together. Just how terrifying would the power be? Without another word, Ling Han rode on the lightning to break out of the encirclement. Chapter 637. 26 treasured sabers exploded at the same time, instantly forming a blinding light in the sky. The terrifying energy blasted down, and pung, pung, pung. The Wang family's side courtyard was instantly shaken into ruins. So, what if they were in the flower blossom tier? Under the impact of the aftermath, they all vomited blood repeatedly, and spiritual pedestal tier warriors were even more miserable. In light cases, they were covered in blood, and in heavy cases, their bones and tendons were broken. It was equivalent to 26 high-level spiritual infant-tier warriors risking their lives, so of course this attack was terrifying. Zhu Xianer was fine. There were 3 spiritual infant-tier warriors by her side, enough to dissipate the aftermath, and Hu Niu was even more special. With a wave of her small hand, The shock wave was cut apart by her and passed on both sides, unable to harm her at all. Extremely far away, Ling Han appeared, his face pale, and couldn't help but vomit a mouthful of blood, but his face revealed a joyful expression. The Heaven Transformation Bowl sucked in 10 treasured sabers, and by now, they were all refined, turning into a pool of liquid metal. He poured it out, and the liquid quickly solidified, turning into a piece of metal. Weighing it, it was at least 50 kilograms. However, compared to the weight of 10 treasured sabers, it was at least 100 times lighter. This was the effect of the Heaven Transformation Bowl, purification. It was a 7th-tier treasured saber before, and now, after purification, it should reach the 8th tier. However, this piece of metal turned into an alloy, and Ling Han couldn't clearly say what this metal should be called. Whatever, it was 8th-tier rare metal anyway, and he could forge many more sharp arrows. He circulated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and the injuries on his body were immediately healed. He smiled slightly and said, "Boy of wealth, do you have any more treasures to give to your grandfather?" Xianyuan Ziguang jumped like thunder. He didn't want to give treasures to Ling Han, but he didn't think that the latter could actually summon a strange stone bowl that easily broke his saber array. He'd rather destroy it than give it to Ling Han, so he activated the saber array to self-destruct. Even so, he couldn't heavily injure Ling Han, making him feel a strong sense of dejection. Ling Han decided not to kill Xianyuan Ziguang. This person's luck was nature-defying, and there were treasures smashed as soon as he went out. Ling Han would let him smash a few more times, and he would be able to loot again in the future. This was like planting chives. If you dug them up, you could only harvest them once. But if you left the roots, you could harvest them in batches. If Xianyuan Ziguang knew what Ling Han was thinking, how would he feel? Wang Yiyun looked at the ruins on the ground, a faint smile still on her pretty face, but there was an additional killing intent in her eyes. A perfectly fine banquet was ruined by Ling Han and Xianyuan Ziguang just like that, but Xianyuan Ziguang was one of them, so if she wanted to hate someone, she could only hate Ling Han. "Brother Ling, I've said it before. If you don't accept my senior brother as the Alliance Master, Yiyun will fight on my senior brother's behalf." She waved her sleeves. Her temperament was elegant like a fairy. Ling Han looked at him and revealed a smile. "Do you also want to bet something with me?" "That stone bowl." Wang Yiyun pointed with her slender finger. "If I win, you give that stone bowl to me." Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "All right, then if you lose, you have to agree to my brother's marriage proposal." He pointed at Murongqing. "Pa, I don't want to marry this ugly girl." Murongqing was so angry that she jumped up. "Don't always use me as an excuse." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "AI, there's no helping it. My brother won't marry you, so let's use some rare metals and spirit medicines to bet." Insolence. Many youngsters roared angrily. He actually dared to blaspheme the fairy in their hearts. Wang Yiyun, however, was incredibly calm. She casually threw out a spirit medicine and said, "This is Danyang Phoenix Cry Grass. It's considered high grade among level 7 spirit medicines. Is it enough?"
Barely.
Ling Han nodded. Let alone a level 7 spirit medicine, even a level 10 divine medicine couldn't compare to the Heaven Transformation Bowl, but he had the confidence to win, so if he earned a little less, then so be it. Wang Yiyun continued, "However, since that stone bowl is the wager, please put aside, Brother Ling Yiyun is worried that Brother Ling won't acknowledge the bet if you lose." This woman was so astute. To Ling Han, the stone bowl was a powerful spirit tool. Previously, even Xianyuan Ziguang's terrifying saber array was broken, but with a few words from Wang Yiyun, he actually couldn't use it anymore. As expected, she had a glib tongue and a meticulous mind. Ling Han laughed loudly and casually threw the stone bowl aside. He said, "You're very smart, but be careful. Don't let your cleverness get the better of you." Wang Yiyun smiled calmly, and with a wave of her hands, a guqin appeared in front of her. It looked extremely ancient, and carved on the body of the guqin were many fully armored warriors, bathing in blood and fighting bravely. It was a little out of place. She sat in the air, her figure slowly floating up, and said, "Brother Ling, please listen to a song of mine."
Wang.
Her hands moved, and the sound of the guqin immediately spread out. It was gentle and beautiful, like the sounds of nature. Everyone revealed dazzled expressions. Wang Yiyun possessed outstanding looks, and added with her skill in the guqin, she indeed had the charm to bewitch millions. The sound of the guqin spread, and Ling Han's gaze was slightly dazed. Trying to sway his mind, Ling Han immediately revealed a cold smile. She was really too naive. He had a sliver of heaven-tier divine sense, and a mere spiritual infant-tier warrior wanted to bewitch him? Chong. The sound of the guqin suddenly changed, turning from the gentle beauty to stern, as if there were ambushes on all sides, and killing was about to happen. Wung, wung, wung. The fully armored warriors on the guqin all lit up, and as the sound of the guqin drifted, they all walked out and stood in the air. There was a total of 81 warriors, and every one of them was a high-level spiritual infant-tier being. This guqin was actually a spirit tool as well, and could summon 81 spiritual infant-tier elites. Truly shocking. It was no wonder that Wang Yiyun schemed to have Ling Han put the Heaven Transformation Bowl to one side. She was afraid that the Heaven Transformation Bowl would restrict the guqin. Now, 81 high-level spiritual infant-tier warriors appeared, so how could he block them? It had to be known that they were only summoned by a spirit tool and wouldn't fear death or injury. It could be said that they were the same as corpse soldiers, the most loyal death warriors. These warriors were fully armed, wearing incredibly thick armor and wielding all kinds of weapons in their hands. One after another, vein-like patterns shone, and they charged towards Ling Han without hesitation. Everyone felt a sense of suffocation. Previously, there were only 36 treasured sabers, but now there were 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors, which was even more unrivaled. Ling Han, on the other hand, was unafraid. Xianyuan Ziguang had unleashed 36 level 7 spirit tools in one go, and these 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors in front of him were only unleashed by a single spirit tool. Their might couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. He directly unleashed the Demon Sky Sword. Wasn't it just a competition of spirit tools? Who was afraid of who? Wung. The vein-like patterns on the Demon Sky Sword lit up. 1, 2, 3. There was one more. Not just one more, this was a level 10 spirit tool, so how could it be so weak? Instantly, an endless might circulated. Ling Han stood with the sword in hand, like a great demon king, exuding an incredibly terrifying aura, completely suppressing the 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors. Chapter 638. Everyone couldn't believe it. 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors were enough to overturn rivers and seas, but Ling Han merely drew out a treasured sword and made the bodies of those warriors tremble as if they were about to collapse. This was a crushing suppression in terms of quality. Level 8, or even level 9 spirit tool. Someone said in a trembling voice. Spirit tools weren't simple sharp weapons, but treasured weapons forged from level 7 rare metal and nourished with the intent of martial art, possessing supreme might. Such a spirit tool's power was astonishing, and even in the hands of a flower blossom tier warrior, it had the might of the spiritual infant tier. For example, Wang Yiyun's zither was definitely a level 7 spirit tool, which was why it could shoot out 81 spiritual infant-tier warriors. Though it wasn't a physical body, its battle prowess wasn't inferior, and it didn't fear injury or death. And the higher the level of a spirit tool, the harder it was to refine it, because there were only so many elites in the world, and nourishing a spirit tool would take at least a few dozen years. As time passed, the intent of martial art would be worn away. Unless it formed a spirit tool, it could absorb the energy of heaven and earth on its own, ensuring that the intent of martial art wouldn't be extinguished, dying along with the body of the spirit tool. Thus, the two of them revealed their high-level spirit tools, which was naturally shocking to everyone. This was the embodiment of a party's background. Otherwise, even if you had level 7 or level 8 rare metal, you could only forge a sharp weapon of this level, but didn't have the might of a spirit tool. Wang Yiyun's expression finally showed an obvious change. The demon birth sword gave her immense pressure, making her no longer so confident. A spiritual infant tier warrior couldn't defeat a flower blossom tier warrior? She was unwilling. When geniuses reached the peak of the flower blossom tier, they could indeed defeat some low-level or even mid-level spiritual infant tier warriors, and though she was only at the second layer of the spiritual infant tier, her battle prowess reached 10 stars, so no matter what, she had the absolute advantage. She definitely couldn't be scared by her opponent. Wang Yun played the zither even more urgently, and the tune turned into a powerful army. The 81 spiritual infant tier warriors instantly regained their might, as if they were on stimulants, charging towards Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han revealed a faint smile. As his comprehension of the sword increased, he finally unlocked another pattern on the demon birth sword, increasing the might of this level 10 spirit tool by a level. What kind of concept was a 10th tier spirit tool? When fully activated, it was equivalent to a shattering void tier elite. He brandished a sword and hung, 29 flashes of sword chi condensed into pseudo-ray. With a PU, it slashed onto a spiritual infant tier warrior. The warrior hurriedly used his battle spear to block, but this pseudo-ray was unleashed by a level 10 spirit tool, and its destructive power was even more terrifying than true ray. The warrior was split in two along with his weapon. He killed a spiritual infant tier cultivator with a single strike. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They felt that Ling Han was so strong that their hair stood on end. If Ling Han was a nature-defying freak like Yao Huiyu or Small Saber King, then everyone could accept it. After all, these guys had already advanced into the spiritual infant tier, and with their battle prowess, they would naturally be able to sweep away all opponents in the same tier. The problem was Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier. Ling Han didn't stop swinging his sword. He killed one with each strike, and no one was his match. He swung his sword 81 times in a row, and the 81 warriors were all cut in half. Logically speaking, they didn't have a physical body, so they naturally didn't have any vital points to speak of. If they were cut in half, they could completely reattach and continue fighting. However, the sword ray unleashed by the demon birth sword naturally carried the might of a level 10 spirit tool, so how could they be reattached? Naturally, they could only be annihilated. Wah! Wang Yun violently spat out a mouthful of blood, her beautiful eyes revealing a look of shock. She had long since refined this treasured zither, and her mind was connected. Now that the 81 warriors were cut in half and annihilated, she was also affected. Her heart was burning, and she felt extremely uncomfortable. She was unwilling to give up, and lightly patted the treasured zither. Boom! A sharp sword actually shot out from the zither. This sword was extremely thin, and the blade was like a zither string. If one wasn't careful, they wouldn't be able to find it. Wang Yun raised her sword and slashed out. The zither-stringed sword actually turned into threads that wrapped around Ling Han. Moreover, the threads were endless, and like blood-sucking origin gold, they could be pulled infinitely. However, this sword was definitely not forged from blood-sucking origin gold. It was the sword chi and origin power that she had shot out. Through a mysterious method, they had fused together and shot towards Ling Han. It was as if she had spread out a heavenly net. The Wang clan's ultimate technique, falling shadow twining silk sword technique. All those years ago, the ultimate technique that the Wang clan's ancestor used to dominate the world. Who would have thought that Wang Yun actually learned it, as expected of a genius? Fairy Wang, kill this brat. Everyone exclaimed in shock, and even more people started cheering for Wang Yun. They naturally hoped that this fairy could win. Somewhat interesting. Ling Han mumbled, and with a shake of his right hand, the demon birth sword shot out a sharp sword chi, easily slashing apart the surrounding sword threads. As long as the difference in power was not too great, a level 10 spirit tool naturally had an overwhelming advantage. Wang Yun's figure flew, her white robes fluttering as if she was a fairy dancing in the moon. However, every strike of her sword sent out a sharp sword chi that slashed towards Ling Han in various arcs, looking incredibly strange. Ling Han used the thunderclap ninth heaven, and his battle prowess soared rapidly, reaching 15 stars of the spiritual infant tier as he charged towards Wang Yiyun. Ding, 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 ding. The two swords clashed endlessly, and sword chi flew everywhere, releasing a shocking light. Even Flower Blossom tier warriors did not dare to stare, afraid that they would be blinded. Wang Yiyun paled in shock. After every strike, her body would feel numb, as if she had been electrocuted. It was so uncomfortable that she almost spat out blood, and even her origin power was dispersed, unable to unleash her full power. In a head-on clash, she was actually inferior to a Flower Blossom tier warrior. It could only be said that the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven was too domineering, and even a super genius like Wang Yiyun was severely restricted. Ling Han was suppressing Wang Yiyun, and after a few dozen moves, the long sword in her hand flew out of her hand. Wang Yiyun gritted her teeth, pulled out her hairpin, and tossed it into the air. Instantly, there was a sparkling light that rapidly enlarged and was about 3 meters long, like a strange skiff. Ling Han frowned and said, "If you continue to pester me, I'll spank your bottom." Wang Yiyun was both embarrassed and angry, so how could she be willing to listen? She continued to activate the hairpin, and origin power gathered at the tip of the hairpin, forming a ball of light that exuded a terrifying aura, as if it could destroy the heavens and earth. Disobedient. Lightning flashed on Ling Han's body. He still could not turn into lightning, but his speed soared by 3 times. In a flash, he appeared on Wang Yiyun's body, and the demon birth sword swept out, whipping towards Wang Yiyun's bottom.
Ah!
Wang Yiyun cried out in shock, feeling pain on one side and embarrassment on the other. This man actually dared to slap her bottom. Xiao, but she was a prodigy of the present age, and even in such a situation, she still activated the hairpin and launched an attack on Ling Han. A ray of light shot out, its destructive power incredibly terrifying. Ling Han slashed out with all his strength, extinguishing this ray of light, yet he felt his right hand go numb, almost unable to raise it. He could not help but be surprised. One had to know how astonishing his physique was, but he actually felt so uncomfortable after taking a blow. This hairpin was really not simple. Pa, pa, pa. He fiercely whipped Wang Yiyun. Chapter 639. This voice stirred the water currents and emitted a powerful dragon's might, making everyone tremble and almost kneel down. In the sea race, bloodline was extremely important. Just like how a human spiritual infant-tier elite could write a decree and suppress a spiritual pedestal-tier cultivator to the point that he couldn't move, but fortunately, a king among martial artists could resist such pressure. But in the sea race, bloodline was the most important. Previously, Helian Tianyan was only in the Gushing Spring tier, yet he suppressed Helian Rong and Wenren Jie to the point that they directly knelt down, and it was the same now. Helian Tianyan snorted and walked to the front with his hands clasped behind his back. He was obviously just a little brat, but his face was full of arrogance as he said, "This lord is here. Quickly have Ao Xingbo come out to greet me." "Brat, you dare to be rude to the Sea Emperor," the voice said coldly. "Ha, don't talk about these useless things. The Sea race is a place of bloodline. This lord's bloodline is pure, so who dares to be disrespectful to this lord?" Helian Tianyan said with a sneer. "Hee, you also know that the sea race is a place of bloodline?" Amidst the sneer, over 100 people walked out from the straits. These people were all wearing dragon robes, and each of them emitted a powerful aura. They were all in the Shattering Void tier, and they all had the bloodline of a true dragon, which was extremely pure, far surpassing that of Helian Rong and Xin Yutong. It wasn't without reason that the Ao family could unify the 4 seas. "Hurry up and roll over to see this lord," Helian Tianyan said proudly. Although this was said to be an expedition, it was basically impossible for a battle to occur. Once his dragon's might was released, it would be a complete one-sided suppression. Thus, it was just a formality. He activated his dragon's might and charged towards the Ao family. Weng, as the dragon's might spread, many members of the Ao family, like the royal families of the 4 seas previously, shivered and almost knelt down. Helian Tianyan was immensely pleased with himself and said, "Disciple, not yet, this lord is just that awesome." He turned around and said to Ling Jianxue, "Humph." Amidst the sneer, a young man walked out, actually unaffected by Helian Tianyan's dragon's might. He said indifferently, "You are only a false dragon. I am the true dragon." Hong. He similarly released his dragon's might, and an aura that was not inferior to Helian Tianyan's swept out. Instantly, the royal families of the Four Seas all lost their battle prowess. Ling Han frowned and directly stored Helian Sun Shui into the Black Tower. Though her bloodline was also very pure, it was far from Helian Tianyan's level. Now, she couldn't even stand steadily. Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang naturally entered into the Black Tower after entering the Sea region. Helian Tianyan was shocked. This young man was actually not affected by his dragon's might, and the dragon's might that he exuded was not inferior to his. How was this possible? He had cultivated to the height of alternative dragons innumerable years ago, and in the end, he was reborn with the tooth of a true dragon. Merely in terms of dragon's might, at least in the vast lands, there was no dragon that could rival him. Why did someone with a bloodline power that could rival his own had come? From the realm of immortals, right? Ling Han interrupted. Since the 5 sects could send people down, why couldn't the AO family? Smart, the young man said with a smile. His appearance was handsome, and he had a breathtaking, heroic spirit. There were 2 dragon horns growing on his head, and he exuded an ancient and noble aura. Horn of a true dragon. Helian Tianyan shivered. He was born from the tooth of a true dragon, and was naturally extremely sensitive to the aura of a true dragon. No wonder the other party could fight against him. So, he was a descendant of the true dragon of the divine world. Ling Han's heart moved. Horn of a true dragon. Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire wanted him to collect 4 divine objects, and wasn't one of them a true dragon's horn? TSK, if he chopped it off and tossed it to that guy, could he exchange it for a mystical power? Hee, truly a frog at the bottom of a well. The young man shook his head, his face full of disdain. Below the immortal level, how could it be possible to reach the level of a true dragon? Only those who have reached the Genesis tier are qualified to be called a true dragon. Pay. The corner of Ling Han's mouth instantly twitched. Only those who had reached the Genesis tier could be called a true dragon, and so on and so forth. Only those who had reached the Genesis tier could be called a true phoenix. Then how was he supposed to get his hands on a true dragon's horn and a heavenly phoenix feather? If he could really obtain them, then he would definitely have to have the cultivation level of the Genesis tier. That would be a top-notch elite in the immortal level, so would he still need to learn the mystical power of the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire? Fuck, no wonder this guy was unwilling to show his true face. Was he afraid of being cursed by him? Helian Tianyan was also a little shocked, and was even more unable to accept it for a moment. He believed that his bloodline was already incomparably pure, and could completely be regarded as a true dragon. He sneered and said, "Don't try to mislead people with your lies. Brat, hurry up and come over to pay your respects to me." He himself only looked like he was 5 or 6 years old, yet called someone else a brat. He really had no sense of shame. "My name is Ao Jian." This young man's expression was calm, and he appeared to be neither anxious nor impatient. In terms of bearing alone, Helian Tianyan, who had already lived for 1 lifetime, was really hard to match. The sea race determines seniority, based on bloodline. Now, since the purity of our bloodline is the same, then let's decide the victor with strength. Helian Tianyan looked at Ling Han, a little dumbfounded. These words were of course reasonable. The sea race obviously competed in bloodline first, but if the purity of bloodline was about the same, then they would compete in strength. Just like Helian Rong and Wenren Jia, there was a bit of a gap in bloodline, but it couldn't form an overwhelming advantage, so they just had to fight. Fight like hell. Once the battle started, they would definitely die. Ling Han couldn't help but admit that they had made a bad move this time, underestimating the immortal realm. At first, he thought it would be as smooth as the 5 sections. Even if someone from the immortal realm came, so what? Geniuses with battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier were extremely rare even in the immortal realm, but they would still be swept aside by Ma Duo Bao. Although Hellion Tianyun's cultivation level had dropped, his bloodline was noble, and this had been continuously proven along the way. But now, everything was about to be reversed. If Hellion Tianyun died in battle, the sea race would naturally return to the Ao family's control. It would be extremely easy, and it would only be a battle. Shattering Void tier against a Heaven tier. Was there even the slightest bit of suspense? Even the 5 sects could send out a genius with 18 stars of Shattering Void tier, so why couldn't the Ao family?
Shit.
Ling Han immediately shook his head at Hellion Tianyun. Whether it was him or Hellion Tianyun, what the two of them lacked the most was time. As long as they were given another 2 or 3 years, no, they might only need a year's time, they would be able to become the strongest beings in this world, not fearing anyone. Now was definitely not the time to start a battle. Fighting would only lead to death. Meanwhile, Hellion Tianyun nodded at Ling Han, expressing his approval of Ling Han's method. Ling Han transmitted a few more words to Hellion Rong through his divine sense, then stored the rabbit, rock spirit, and Hunyo into the Black Tower. He then grabbed Hellion Tianyun, turned around, and ran.
Of course he ran.
If he didn't run, why would he stay and drink tea? Everyone was startled. Why did he run? Hellion Rong received Ling Han's transmission and reacted the fastest, immediately saying, "Fake true dragon, don't run." However, he was suppressed by Ao Jian's dragon's might and couldn't pursue at all, so he could only shout for show. Only then did the royal families of the 4 seas react, joining the ranks of condemnation. It couldn't be helped. In the sea race where bloodline determined everything, they could only firmly state their stand now to avoid the imperial family settling accounts later on. This was also why Ling Han wanted Hellion Rong to denounce him. Because Hellion Rong could run but the Hellion family couldn't. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 640. Ling Han could actually break through to the spiritual infant tier, but he chose to take it slow. In his last life, he only cared about pursuing cultivation levels, but in this life, he obviously wouldn't be in such a rush. Instead, he would cultivate each tier to a perfect level before starting to break through. Anyways, he was still young, not even 20 years old, so there was no need to rush. He wanted to form 30 flashes of sword chi, then push the indestructible heaven scroll to the level of diamond body, and then break through to the spiritual infant tier. When the spiritual infant was nurtured, it would be tempered by sword ray and nourished by the indestructible heaven scroll, reaching the level of indestructibility. However, 29 flashes of sword chi was considered the limit by the ancients. Even the mysterious 3000 was 3000, not 3100. It could be seen that this step was extremely difficult. And the body of diamond was also extremely difficult to cultivate. Ling Han had eaten so many natural treasures, but his body was like a bottomless pit. There was no time to fill it up no matter what. Of course, cultivating the 9 dragons' tire body art was also one of the reasons, causing much of the essence to be expended on the increase of physical strength. Kenya's side went very smoothly. With the medicinal pills and various treasures provided by Ling Han, he molded himself into the image of some hidden clan's 2nd generation, waving his treasures and smashing people as he pleased, looking like, "I'm an idiot, come and scam me." He befriended a true disciple of the Heaven Sword sect, opening the way with medicinal pills and precious materials, smashing the other until he was willing to call him brother. Kenyi saw that the time was right and threw out the secret of the ancient treasure map, asking him to compare the ancient map and obtain the treasure together. That true disciple naturally agreed gladly. Anyways, there were still more than 4 months until the opening of the Ancient Academy, so he could definitely make a trip back and forth. Now, he could only wait. After another few days, the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing returned. They had been training in the mountains and fields, fighting the fiercest beasts to sharpen themselves and earn some extra money along the way. After all, spiritual infant tier beasts were all very valuable. Their flesh, skin, and bones could all be sold for a high price. However, now they all handed over their spoils to Ling Han. That was because only in Ling Han's hands would these spoils be able to display their greatest effects. Ling Han would never mistreat his own people, so he naturally gave everything to his two sworn brothers without holding back. The ingredients and tonics in the Black Tower were all at their disposal, and there was also spiritual liquid. This was a great tonic that could quickly increase the accumulation of origin power. For these two geniuses, the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, the comprehension of martial art was not too difficult. Instead, it was the accumulation of origin power that had to be firmly established step by step. It was impossible to build a castle in the air. Thus, the two of them increased their comprehension of cultivation level in the midst of battle, and also had the spiritual liquid to increase their accumulation of origin power. Their improvement was astonishingly fast, and according to this speed, they would be able to reach the peak of the spiritual infant tier in 2 years at most.
It was terrifying.
Freaks like Small Saber King and Lang Yitian had the hope of breaking through to the deity transformation tier when they were close to 40 years old, so they would have to reach the peak of the spiritual infant tier after 30 years old no matter what. The Rain Emperor was old in the first place, and this didn't count, but Mu Rongqing was only 25 years old, which meant that he could reach the peak of the spiritual infant tier before 30 years old. If he was lucky, breaking through to the deity transformation tier before 30 years old wasn't impossible. One had to know that Small Saber King and Lang Yitian received the full nurturing of ancient sects, and being able to surpass them in advancement was naturally shocking. It couldn't be helped. Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor, and added with the Black Tower that could accelerate the growth of spirit herbs, it would be strange if it wasn't fast. Could it be that a divine object like the Black Tower couldn't compare to the mere Absolute Saber Sect and Heaven Sword Sect? The Rain Emperor and the others brought back 2 big pieces of news that could shock the entire Middle State and even the vast lands. It should be a month ago. The Thousand Corpse Sect bought Million Treasure City, the Rain Emperor said. Pooh! Ling Han instantly spluttered. That worked? The Spirit Treasures Pavilion and the Alchemist Society aren't lacking in money, so why would they sell their home? He asked in confusion. And what price did the Thousand Corpse Sect offer that even a Shattering Void tier elite and 2 heaven-grade alchemists couldn't refuse? If it weren't for fear of these 3, the Thousand Corpse Sect wouldn't have lured them away the first time, wanting to forcefully attack Million Treasure City and cook the rice into cooked rice. It was precisely because they didn't want to fight head-on with these 3 that the Thousand Corpse Sect would compromise and buy Million Treasure City. The Thousand Corpse Sect definitely paid a huge price, Mu Rongqing said. To be able to move the rich and imposing Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Alchemist Society, the Thousand Corpse Sect must have paid a huge price. Moreover, to move a Shattering Void tier elite and 2 heaven-grade alchemists, it probably involves the secret of becoming an immortal and divine pill, right? Ling Han nodded. In these 10,000 years, aside from Jiang Yufeng, who was suspected to have entered the realm of immortals, he hadn't heard of anyone else shattering the void and becoming an immortal. Even if Jiang Yufeng became an immortal, that was only Ling Han's speculation, and there was no legend left behind. Feng Peryan also said that shattering the void might be very dangerous now, so he didn't dare to break through immediately. Instead, he continued to increase his cultivation and wait until he reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. And an ancient sect like the Thousand Corpse Sect's inheritance was definitely not weaker than the Heaven Sword Sects, so they might have grasped the secret of becoming an immortal, and it wouldn't be strange for them to have a few divine-grade pill recipes in their hands. No matter what, it was a fact that Million Treasure City had fallen into the hands of the Thousand Corpse Sect. However, since the Thousand Corpse Sect paid such a huge price, their scheme must be even bigger. Ling Han said unhurriedly. Previously, he had speculated that Million Treasure City was either buried with a large number of Shattering Void tier corpses, or there was some precious treasure that could make the Thousand Corpse Sect stronger. The 5 great ancient sects are very dissatisfied with this, and have already decided to send troops to attack Million Treasure City. Their attitude is very firm, the Rain Emperor said. From this point, the 5 great ancient sects are really warm-hearted. This is completely unlike them. Ling Han shook his head, his expression full of curiosity. It wasn't that there had never been turmoil in history, but it was rare to see the 5 great ancient sects make a move. Only when the Thousand Corpse sect appeared did they become extremely proactive, as if they had a personal grudge. The 5 great ancient sects battling the Thousand Corpse sect, this is really a big matter. If it's not handled properly, it might cause chaos in the whole continent. Ling Han said after some thought, and couldn't help but sigh. He was now in the process of growing up, and what he hoped for the most was a stable cultivation environment. He definitely didn't want great chaos. Since the Thousand Corpse sect dared to appear in public, they probably have a very high chance of success, the Rain Emperor said. Ling Han nodded. The Thousand Corpse sect had made a comeback, and it was obvious that they were fully prepared. If they were easily destroyed by the 5 great ancient sects, that would be too much of a trifle. What's the situation now? He asked. The 5 great sects are gathering their forces, and have even issued a command to the whole world to annihilate the Thousand Corpse sect together, the Rain Emperor said. However, we are far away from here, and the news needs some time to travel here. It's unclear whether they've started fighting now. Chapter 641. Ling Han thought for a moment and said with a smile, with our current strength, this kind of thing can only be thought of. No matter who wins or loses, it's not something we can interfere with. Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing both exuded a strong fighting spirit, revealing an impassioned expression. Rain Emperor was a formidable character of his generation, and the Overlord's aura was the strongest. Mu Rongqing was sloppy, only interested in becoming the strongest in the world. The 3 had different personalities, but what they had in common was that they all had a fanatical pursuit of martial art, an indomitable drive, and fearless determination. Otherwise, they wouldn't have become sworn brothers. In another 30 years, it'll be up to us to guide the winds and clouds, they all said vehemently. Competing with Shattering Void tier elites in 30 years? If word of this got out, it would really make people laugh themselves to death. However, the 3 of them were filled with confidence in themselves. With their talent, added with Ling Han's alchemical pills, they definitely had the chance to charge into the Shattering Void tier within 30 years and rule the world. There's another news. Ling Han calmed down and asked again. This news is a bit interesting. Rain Emperor paused. Not long ago, a small city in the Middle State suddenly announced the establishment of the Purple Moon Empire, establishing a ruler, setting up 100 officials, and worshipping by all. Ling Han was dumbfounded. There was actually someone establishing a country. What was going on? Aside from the desolate north, the 4 regions and 1 state didn't have the concept of a country. There were only ancient clans and sects that divided the territory, each ruling over a region. Relatively speaking, the vast lands didn't have any laws, and followed the idea that the strong were respected and that the strong were the law. Comparing the desolate 9 to the outside world, establishing a country was actually quite good. There were rules that everyone had to abide by, which could reduce a lot of killing. Of course, if the rulers were corrupted, then regardless of whether it was an empire, a sect, or a clan, it was all the same. Ling Han suddenly thought of why there were no empires in the Middle State and the 4 regions. Power of the nation was a good thing. At the time, Rain Emperor was only half a step into the Flower Blossom tier, but was able to rival a true Flower Blossom tier elite. Aside from Rain Emperor's own strength, power of the nation also played a key role. Since power of the nation was so good, why didn't other forces consider it? In the vast lands, the imperial court is a taboo. Mu Rongqing said, the southern region has an iron law. Any faction can fight for territory, but they can't establish a dynasty. Otherwise, the entire southern region will destroy them. The Rain Emperor nodded as well, and said, I've looked through ancient records. The founding emperor of our country had only thought of founding a nation because he had discovered an ancient esoteric technique in the Devil's Sky mystery realm. If it wasn't for the fact that the desolate north was too small and that it had deviated from the mainland, it would have been destroyed long ago. If you hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have thought of it. Power of the nation is obviously an extremely good thing and beneficial to cultivation. So why has there never been an imperial dynasty appearing in the vast lands? Ling Han looked curious. In his last life, there had also been no imperial dynasty appearing. It was just that at that time his mind had been completely focused on alchemy, and he had not paid any attention to this point. But in the ancient times, the true ancient times, there were empires in the vast lands, and they were incredibly powerful. For example, the thunderclap ninth heaven was obtained from the treasury of the ancient dynasty. Moreover, this was not the strongest divine ability. That was something that happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. That ancient dynasty wanted to bring the entire vast lands to ascend to the realm of gods, but obviously failed. At that time, this ancient dynasty unified the entire continent and was incredibly powerful. Could it be that this Purple Moon Empire wants to serve? The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing both exclaimed. Who's the ruler? Ling Han asked. Surnamed Ma, called Ma Duo Bao, and called himself the Purple Moon Divine Emperor, the Rain Emperor said. Pooh, Ling Han spurted out again. Fuck, Ma Duo Bao. He recalled that when he was in Million Treasure City, Ma Duo Bao had once earnestly invited him to join them and split open the skies together. Who would have thought that only a few months had passed, and this guy had really done a great undertaking? However, without the support of top-notch strength, how long could this Purple Moon Empire exist? Wait, the ancient dynasty seemed to have failed in splitting open the skies, and then was destroyed. Ma Duo Bao also said that he wanted to split open the skies and even established a nation. Could it be that splitting open the skies had to be done in the form of a nation? Ling Han felt that his mind was a bit messed up. In this life, all sorts of messy things had come out. Ma Duo Bao was definitely not an idiot. On the contrary, this person's strength was unfathomable, and Ling Han couldn't see through him at all. Either the other cultivated some secret technique, or his strength was at least in the high-level heaven tier. Now, on the left was the Thousand Corpse sect, which was definitely not a peaceful lord. It definitely had its eyes on the common people of the world, wanting to torment them and refine them into corpse soldiers. On the right was the Purple Moon Empire. Since it had established a nation, then expanding its territory was naturally a matter of course. Conquering the world was unavoidable, and the majesty of the ancient dynasty reappeared. The world seems to be in great chaos. Ling Han sighed. Moreover, the 5 great sects also predicted that a similar great disaster would happen 10,000 years ago. Truly, all the excitement has gathered together, the Rain Emperor also said. We can only cultivate diligently and improve our strength to have the ability to protect ourselves and speak, Mu Rongqing concluded. Ling Han and the Rain Emperor both nodded.
That.
The rabbit listened for a long time at the side, raised its little paw, and said, Uncle Rabbit has some understanding of that so-called great disaster. Oh, speak quickly. Ling Han instantly became spirited. The rabbit put on an act and said, Where's Uncle Rabbit's tea? Ah. It still wanted to pinch it but ended up being bitten by Hunyo until it cried out. Speak quickly. Hunyo said in dissatisfaction. This rabbit was indeed somewhat despicable. It clearly knew that Hunyo liked to bite it the most, yet repeatedly tried to provoke Hunyo to bite it. It coughed and said, There's a rumor in Uncle Rabbit's line that every 10,000 years or so, the heaven and earth will conduct a reckoning. At that time, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering, and only a very, very small portion of people will survive. Reckoning? Ling Han was surprised.
This was a different saying.
People like Uncle Rabbit, who have old ancestors living in the divine realm, belong to the exempt category. No one dares to touch a single hair of Uncle Rabbit, but for people like you, that's tragic, the rabbit said. Ling Han couldn't help but scoff. This reckoning really bullies the weak and fears the strong. Brat, this is the life of a rabbit. Open up. The rabbit comforted him, but no matter how he looked at it, it seemed to be showing off. Reckoning? Why is there a reckoning, and who is doing it? Ling Han asked. The rabbit pointed at the sky and said, "As for why, Uncle Rabbit doesn't know either. The heavens referred to the divine realm, and the heavenly Tao shouldn't go so far as to harm the common people. And from the memory stone that Zi Shui Xian left behind, it was indeed people from the divine realm that came, wanting to annihilate the common people." Ling Han still returned to that old question. If the divine realm really wanted to reckon, how could the 5 great ancient sects stop them? There had to be another reason behind this, and the answer could be hidden in the clear Harmony Palace Hall. Ling Han couldn't help but want the ancient map even more urgently. "Ling Han, come out and die." Chapter 642. Ling Han, come out to die. A cold voice rang out, and like a blade slicing past, the nearby leaves fell one after another, sliced into pieces. Many people vomited blood, and were even more shocked. Who was this person? Just a voice was so terrifying, making people about to collapse. "Third brother, your enemy," Mu Rongqing asked, and then immediately became excited. "Wait for me to take him down." Ling Han smiled and said, "Second brother, I'm afraid you're not his match." "Oh, who is that person?" Even the Rain Emperor was curious, revealing a burning fighting spirit. Small Saber King Wang, a figure appeared. He was tall and slender, and his whole body was entwined with saber intent, turning into countless sabers of various shapes. There were long sabers, short sabers, gold sabers, silver sabers, and every saber was densely woven with vein-like patterns, emitting a powerful concept. Everyone's mind was in a state of panic, and some people even involuntarily knelt down, making them shocked. One had to know that those who could come here were all geniuses and had at least formed a flash of qi, having the potential to be a king among martial artists, but even so, they still couldn't withstand this person's aura, which showed how terrifying this person was. A king among kings. Here, geniuses gathered, and after almost a month, there were obviously more people who came, but now, under the pressure of Small Saber King's aura, several tens of thousands of people didn't make the slightest sound, intimidated by one person. This was the bearing of a king among kings, making countless geniuses bow their heads just by standing there. Ling Han stood out, and the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing stood on his left and right, showing an attitude of advancing and retreating together with him. Small Saber King, peak stage spiritual infanteer. Even if the 3 of them fought together, no one would say anything. With this cultivation level, not to mention 3 people attacking together, even 10 people attacking together wouldn't be too much. No way, this brat even has a feud with Small Saber King. TSK, a few days ago, he did that with Fairy Yun, offended the Blue Thunder sect, and now he's being hunted by the Absolute Saber sect's Small Saber King. He's offended 2 of the 5 great ancient sects. Why does Small Saber King want to kill this brat? Could it be that Small Saber King is interested in Fairy Yun? No way, I heard Fairy Yun is in love with Lang Yitian. TSK, a love triangle, how messy. Wrong. Now you even added this kid. It's clearly a 4-sided love. Everyone said one after another. Not only women, but men were also quite gossipy, especially people like Li Fengyu, who wished he could yell at the top of his lungs. Small Saber King stood proudly in midair. He had been chasing after Ling Han all this time, but lost track of him. It wasn't until a few days ago that he heard that Ling Han made a scene at Wang Yun's banquet that he hurried over. His gaze swept across Ling Han and the other 2 as his lips curled into a disdainful smile. "Do you think you can stop me with just the 3 of you? How would we know if we don't try?" Ling Han's heroic spirit soared to the clouds. These 2 sworn brothers of his were also king tiers of martial arts, especially the Rain Emperor. He could be said to be a late bloomer, but instead, he had accumulated a lot of experience before he could explode, and his battle prowess was astonishing. Idiot. Small Saber King no longer had the interest to speak, and directly brandished his saber. A terrifying saber chi swept past, and like a shocking ray, it slashed down from the sky. False ray. Ling Han gave a loud shout, and directly unleashed the demon birth sword to block. Facing a strong enemy like Small Saber King, he couldn't possibly have the slightest bit of reservation, or else he would be playing with his own life. With a ding, the treasured sword met the saber ray, but Ling Han's figure was forcibly pushed backwards. His legs were like shovels, digging out two deep grooves on the extremely hard mountain rocks. Break! Ling Han gave a loud shout, and his long sword slashed downwards. Pooh! The saber ray was broken in the middle and sliced past his left and right sides. Meanwhile, the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing had already charged out. Both of them used fists, and with the intent of martial art and origin power wrapped around their fists, they possessed an extremely terrifying destructive power that could clash with sharp blades head-on. Two minor characters that have just entered the spiritual infant tier want to become enemies with me? Small Saber King sneered, and drew his saber to slash, his aura imposing. The Rain Emperor roared in fury, and as he swung his fists repeatedly, fist rays surged and full of killing intent. Small Saber King finally let out a cry of surprise. Ray, even if it was only the condensation of 10 flashes of qi, that still surpassed 30 flashes of qi, this was a qualitative suppression. Mu Rongqing also showed his might. Although he didn't condense Ray, his grasp of qi reached as many as 29 flashes, and his battle prowess similarly couldn't be underestimated. Below, Ling Han also charged up with his sword raised. Three minor characters, not worth mentioning. Small Saber King immediately calmed down. Although the Rain Emperor condensed Ray, he broke through with only 10 flashes of qi, so his strength was limited. Moreover, he had the advantage in cultivation level and was half a step into the deity transformation tier, but his battle prowess had long rushed to this level, at least having battle prowess of 5 stars of the deity transformation tier, so strong that it was hair-raising. He slashed with his saber, and instantly, Ling Han and the others didn't dare to receive it head-on, and could only retreat. Small Saber King laughed loudly, and stared at Ling Han as he slashed madly. This person killed his father, causing him to hate him to the bones, and there was also a little girl who obtained his Thunderclap 9th Heaven mystical power, so he had to kill her as well, directly extracting her soul. Ling Han snorted, and lightning flickered on his body as he instantly appeared in front of Small Saber King, slashing with his sword. What? Small Saber King exclaimed, not because Ling Han's speed was too fast, but because the opponent had lightning flickering, and that was obviously the Thunderclap 9th Heaven. How is this possible? A mystical power could only be passed on to one person, so why was there Hunyo first, and then Ling Han, both of them learning the Thunderclap 9th Heaven? If he knew that not only Ling Han and Hunyo, but also Helian Sun Shui also learned the Thunderclap 9th Heaven, what kind of expression would his face have? He would probably be shocked to the point of being unable to accept it. How could you possibly learn the Thunderclap 9th Heavens? Small Saber King said sternly. Hunyo was obviously below, and couldn't have had her soul extracted, so where did Ling Han learn this mystical power from? None of your business. Ling Han waved his sword and slashed urgently. 29 flashes of sword qi condensed into a fake ray, whistling towards Small Saber King. This was a fake ray unleashed by a 10th tier spirit tool, and its power was almost no weaker than a real ray. Even Small Saber King didn't dare to be careless, and had to brandish his saber to parry. Otherwise, if he was struck by the sword ray, even he would be heavily injured. Small Saber King's gaze was cold as he sneered, and said, "Fine, then I only need to kill you." Although he didn't take Hunyo seriously, the little girl's speed shocked even him, and he couldn't guarantee that he could successfully kill her. His left hand pushed out, sweeping towards the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, while his right hand wielded his saber and slashed at Ling Han. Every strike was merciless. He only wanted Ling Han's life. Ling Han and his brothers attacked in unison, but Small Saber King was too strong. His deity transformation tier battle prowess gave him the absolute upper hand, and every strike he unleashed made Ling Han and the others look battered and exhausted. If it wasn't for Ling Han using the annihilating dragon star arrow to distract him, the three of them would have already suffered a crushing defeat. Ling Han swallowed a pill. That was the 5 revolutions black jade pill. He had concocted a total of 3 pills. Previously, when he was battling Xianyuan Ziguang, he ate one, and now it was the second one. Once the medicinal pill entered his stomach, it immediately showed its effects, increasing his battle prowess by a whole 9 stars. His battle prowess had originally reached 15 stars of the spiritual infant tier, or even stronger, and now that his battle prowess increased by another 9 stars, he instantly soared into the deity transformation tier. Chapter 643. Who would have thought that what should have been a huge crisis was actually resolved so easily? Of course, it was also incredibly shocking. An immortal descended and made a move, suppressing the eye of Heavenly Tao to the point where it couldn't do anything about it. This was definitely a grand scene, and it could be considered as giving enough face to the demon servants. Young Imperial Empress, let's go home. The old woman in cyan took Hunyo's hand, and divine light circulated, and Hunyo's injuries immediately healed. No, Nyo wants to be with Ling Han. Hunyo hurriedly struggled, and with a leap, hid behind Ling Han. The old woman in cyan immediately walked towards Ling Han, and the female generals did the same, all staring at Ling Han with unfriendly gazes. Of course, abducting a child, and moreover their young imperial empress, this man really deserved to die. The old woman in cyan stared at Ling Han, and a terrifying pressure circulated. Pooh! Ling Han instantly spurted out blood, and his body made a cracking sound. His bones were groaning, and even breaking. The physique that he was so proud of actually couldn't withstand the old woman's stare. As expected of an immortal, one that could even ignore the rules of a small world. Yi Shuang's face was numb, and she mumbled, "What kind of powerful existence is this, able to even break the rules of a small world? Could it be a Genesis tier powerhouse? Heavens, this lady actually had the fortune of meeting a Genesis tier powerhouse." This was truly invincible power. Not to mention Ma Duo Bao coming personally. Even if the 5 sex powerhouses descended together and displayed their strongest ability, facing this old woman, they would probably be killed in one move. "You're not allowed to hurt Ling Han." Hunyo hurriedly stepped forward bravely, opening her small hands to protect in front of Ling Han. She glared at the old woman, exuding a shocking killing intent. Divine light actually rose from her chest, exuding an extremely powerful presence. Power of inheritance. The female generals all looked pious and knelt down one after another, murmuring something. Their gazes towards Hunyo were filled with fanaticism. Only the old woman in cyan was an exception. She smiled and said, "As expected, Iyun handed the power of inheritance to you. Girl, you're our Rock Palace's young empress, the future supreme ruler. How could you be restrained by a man? This old woman eliminated this future trouble for you. You dare." Hunyo hurriedly turned around and hugged Ling Han. "Ling Han is Nyo's. If you dare to touch a single hair on his head, Nyo will commit suicide." She seemed to have realized that she had no way to deal with the latter's strength, so she could only use her own life as a threat. Ling Han humphed, put Hunyo down with her in his arms, and said, "I have no enmity with Senior, yet Senior insists on killing me. What logic is this? You've gone mad. This being is too powerful. Unless I recover to my complete state, I'm completely no match for her." Small Tower called out in his mind, its tone becoming incredibly terrified for the first time. Being able to make Small Tower lose its composure, the strength of this old woman was evident. The old woman in cyan sneered and said, "Brat, how dare you? Do you know that if I really wanted to kill you, no one would be able to stop me? You're not allowed to harm Ling Han." Hunyo waved her arms and legs, extremely hateful. Senior strength is indeed far above this junior's, but just because this junior's strength is inferior doesn't mean that I don't have any pride. Ling Han was unyielding. "Senior can kill me, but cannot shut my mouth." Ha ha ha. The old woman in cyan laughed loudly. "Grand Elder, This brat has a very strong influence on the young imperial empress, so it's better to kill him, a female general suggested. That's right. The young imperial empress is still young and insensible and is most easily bewitched by others. This person's intentions are deserving of death. The old woman in cyan waved her hand and said, "Fine. After we return, we will never be able to see this brat again. Seeing that he still has some pride, we'll spare his life." "Yes, Grand Elder." All the female generals answered sternly. The old woman in cyan looked at Hunyo smilingly and said, "Little girl, come back with me."
No, no.
Hunyo shook her head anxiously. The old woman in cyan sighed and said, "Then I can only kill that Ling Han."
No.
Hunyo was anxious and pointed at the old woman's nose and said, "Didn't you say you wouldn't harm Ling Han just now? But you're disobedient, so I can't do anything about it," the old woman in cyan said with a smile. Hunyo pouted, and after thinking it over, she finally nodded and said, "All right, Nyo agrees. That's more obedient," the old woman in cyan said with a smile. How many years had she lived? How could it be that she couldn't deal with a little girl? Hunyo's eyes shifted, and she said, "But Nyo wants to take Ling Han with her."
Pooh.
The old woman in cyan instantly choked and almost coughed. Why was this little girl so difficult to deal with? She said with a serious expression, "No, this boy definitely can't go back with us." Hunyo bawled loudly and began to make a scene, but the old woman was unmoved. "Don't worry, you go back with them first. I will definitely find you," Ling Han said. So, what if she was a great elite of the immortal realm? There would be a day when he too would be able to cultivate to that level. "You promise?" Hunyo asked pitifully. Ling Han nodded and said with extreme caution, "I promise." All the female generals looked at Ling Han with disdainful gazes. This brat had no idea how powerful the force they belonged to was. Even if you cultivated into a corpse, you would still be far from it. In this lifetime, you would never be able to set foot on their territory. Don't even think about it. All right. Hunyo agreed unwillingly and slowly walked towards the old woman in cyan. She tilted her head and said, "Nyo wants to take some people with her, or else Nyo will definitely be very, very disobedient." The old woman in cyan laughed loudly and said, "As long as it's not this brat, there's no problem." Only then was Hunyo happy. Pointing at Hellion Sun Shui, she said, "Take this woman with no chest with you." She paused, then pointed at the Lunar King and said, "And this big bewitching girl, Nyo doesn't feel at ease." Then she pointed at Yi Shuang Shuang. "And this little bewitching girl, Nyo doesn't feel at ease either." Her jealousy flared, and even Lu Yutong, Li Sichan, and Zhu Xian were named by her, and even Ling Jianshui. Ling Han couldn't help but have a strange expression. Hunyo really planned to make him a loner. However, this force was definitely a supreme existence in the realm of immortals. To be able to enter the realm of immortals with Hunyo's care was actually a great opportunity. "Lord Nyo, take Uncle Rabbit, take Uncle Rabbit." Rabbit was extremely proactive. Now that Hunyo had become some young empress of the realm of immortals, her future was extremely bright, and Uncle Rabbit obviously wanted to hitch a ride with her. Hunyo, however, snorted and said, "You accompany Ling Han, and take good care of Nyo's Ling Han. Don't let him be bored, and more importantly, don't let him get hurt, or else Nyo will eat you." Rabbit lamented the heavens and the earth. What sin had it committed to actually be abandoned? Ling Han didn't plan to persuade Hunyo to change her mind. That was fine. He'd let the people around him follow Hunyo. Firstly, they could obtain better cultivation resources and environment, and secondly, it was safer than staying by his side. Apart from the great enemy of the Rock Palace, the existence that caused the fall of the former empress. But for the old woman in cyan and the others, presumably, the Rock Palace should be very powerful and have deep roots. Otherwise, with the death of the empress, how could they not be destroyed? Ling Han nodded and released the people in the Black Tower, letting them board the ship. Cell phones were more refreshing to read. Chapter 644. Yao Huiyu was extremely pained. His Zhu Xian heir actually looked like this? When they were in the north region, Zhu Xian heir's figure and the temperament she exuded were enough to enchant him, and he willingly prostrated himself at her feet. But now that he had truly seen her face, it was as if a knife had cut into his heart. This contrast was too great. His first love turned into bubbles just like that. Ling Han laughed loudly, hooked his arm around Yao Huiyu's shoulder, and said, "Little Yao, whether we fight to the death tomorrow, that's a matter for tomorrow.
Thank you for today.
Come, let's drink. We won't return until we're drunk." A person like Yao Huiyu, who had self-control, would naturally not be willing to get drunk, but right now, he only wanted to get drunk to resolve all his grievances. He sat down without a word and did not refuse anyone. He poured cup after cup of wine into his mouth and very quickly collapsed onto the floor, snoring loudly. "So bad at drinking," the Rain Emperor said with a smile. Ling Han said meaningfully, "Alcohol enters the heart of sorrow, and it's easier to get drunk." When Yao Huiyu woke up the next day, he found himself lying alone on a rock. Once he got up, he felt a swelling pain in his head. The aftereffects of a hangover had acted up. He held his head, thinking that he definitely wouldn't get drunk again in the future. He looked up at the sky and couldn't help but reveal a self-mocking smile. Previously, he was at her beck and call, ingratiating himself with Zhu Xian'er. Actually, did he really fall in love with her? He hadn't even seen her face, so how could there be true feelings? However, his feelings were deceiving him, imagining her as an exceptional beauty, so he would admire her wholeheartedly, and now his dream was shattered. From now on, he could put all his thoughts on martial art. Yao Huiyu's thoughts were clear, and his face instantly revealed an expression of ecstasy because he touched the barrier of 30 flashes of sword qi. As expected, the violent fluctuation of emotions had a great impact on the control of qi. Previously, he cultivated diligently, but to no avail. "I want to become the number one in the younger generation," he said with lofty sentiments, completely forgetting his disappointment in love. The greatest genius obviously had unparalleled self-control. Ling Han waited for another 5 days, but Ken Yi still hadn't seen that disciple from the Heaven's Sword sect. Instead, a piece of news arrived. There was an earthquake at the Great Bright Mountain, and it seemed like an incredible treasure had been born. Lightning soared into the sky, illuminating the starry sky. Because of this, many people had already set off towards the Daming Mountain. In any case, it was within the Flying Blossom County, and it would only take them a day or two to get there. In order to wait for Ken Yi, Ling Han could only restrain himself. Moreover, the flickering of lightning didn't mean that a precious treasure was truly born. Previously, when he guided lightning into his body and cultivated the thunderclap ninth heaven, didn't he also guide lightning to strike for a day and a night? Perhaps this was a person who cultivated a lightning-type cultivation method and was taking a crucial step. Ling Han waited patiently, but the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing had already set off. The Rain Emperor said that if there really were any treasures of the lightning element there, he would definitely bring them back for Ling Han so that he could truly form a body of lightning. With the sincerity of the two brothers, Ling Han couldn't say no, and could only let them leave. However, Ling Han indeed wanted to form a body of lightning. Now, he was only using the power of lightning to speed up his body, but if he could transform his body into lightning, his speed could be increased by a level, and he would be able to catch up to Hunyao. The Great Bright Mountain. Isn't that one of the 21 mountain ranges suspected to be the Boundless Mountains? Zhu Xian'er asked Ling Han after learning about it. Ling Han nodded and said, "It can't be such a coincidence, right? The Clear Harmony Palace Hall is really there." It wasn't impossible because Zi Shuexian cultivated the power of lightning, and the Great Bright Mountain just so happened to have lightning soaring into the sky. It was too much of a coincidence. Wait for another day. If there's still no news from Ken Yi, we'll set off. Ling Han decided to go. However, Ken Yi came that night and brought with him a piece of bad news. That Heaven's Sword sect's true disciple actually didn't manage to bring back the ancient map. He said that the sect controlled it very strictly, and treated it like the best martial art cultivation technique, and definitely wouldn't allow outsiders to see it. Putting aside the fact that outsiders couldn't see it, even if someone from their own sect wanted to see it, they would have to reach a certain cultivation level, such as Heaven Tier, or an outstanding disciple like Yao Huiyu.
Fuck.
Ling Han couldn't help but swear. It was just a map. Was it so precious? It shouldn't be possible that the Heaven Sword sect was afraid that they'd discover some secret left behind by Zi Shuexian. How would they know that Zi Shuexian had left behind some last words? Moreover, so many years had passed. Perhaps this place had already been buried underground forever, or had been completely destroyed. These 5 great sects were abnormal. Ling Han didn't hesitate any longer, and brought Zhu Xian'er and Hunyo with him towards the Great Bright Mountains. Rabbit naturally followed, eating 1,000-year-old ginseng like it was a carrot all day long, and even boasted shamelessly that this was interest. When Ling Han returned 2 dragon blood tyrant ginseng to it, then he wouldn't have to pay it interest. The consequence of this cheap mouth was naturally being bitten by Hunyo, making it wail in pain, but it didn't dare to do so again and again. How could the word cheap be enough? They talked and laughed along the way, and very soon, they arrived at the Great Bright Mountains. Flying Blossom County wasn't the largest county in the Middle State, but it was definitely the county with the most mountain ranges. This Great Bright Mountains was also a large mountain range that stretched for several hundred miles, and was shockingly large. This place was filled with a primitive aura, and terrifying demonic beasts ran amok. Ordinary people wouldn't dare to enter too deeply, as one careless mistake would cost them their lives. Ling Han gazed into the distance. The trees here were all as tall as treasured swords, and their average height was more than 300 meters. They stood upright, and there were very few branches. Just by looking at them, they gave off a somber feeling. And on the east side of the mountain range, there was indeed a ball of lightning that soared into the sky. It surged and scuttled, spreading throughout the entire mountain peak. Let's go. Ling Han and the others flew in that direction. Now that even Zhu Xian'er had broken through to the flower blossom tier, the strength of their team could be said to be quite formidable. They very soon arrived at the foot of the mountain peak, and saw that there were occasional flashes of lightning halfway up the mountain. This was the source of the lightning in this place, and it affected the entire mountaintop, making people not dare to approach. Ling Han revealed a shocked expression and blurted out, "Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder." You brat actually know about Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder too," Rabbit said in surprise, appearing to be very strange. "This is one of the 10 great ancient absolute thunders." "What 10 great ancient absolute thunders?" Zhu Xian'er asked curiously. Rabbit went crazy when people came, and with someone supporting it, it instantly had the urge to show off, but unexpectedly received a fierce glare from Hunyo. In the end, it rubbed its, but that was covered with wounds that hadn't healed yet, not daring to act lowly anymore, and said, "There are spirits in heaven and earth. Even this mountain, this water, this stone, this fire, all have the possibility of developing intelligence and forming a special life." "Oh, then isn't that the spirit of fire spirit, the spirit of stone, and the spirit of water?" Zhu Xian'er came to a realization, and suddenly clapped her hands, saying, "Could it be that there's a spirit of thunder here?" Ling Han nodded, and said, "That should be the case, and it's also an impressive guy." Chapter 645. How impressive is it? Zhu Xian'er asked again. Ling Han pondered for a moment, then said with a serious expression, "Even among the living beings nurtured by heaven and earth, there are still differences in strength. If the thunder spirits are ranked according to their strength, then the Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder can be ranked in the top 10. Then what rank can the Boulder Man and Strange Fire rank?" Zhu Xian'er was curious. Only with comparison could she have a clear understanding. Ling Han compared and said, "Small Stone can at most squeeze into the top 100. Strange Fire might not even be in the top 100, but after being tempered, it should be able to enter the top 100 now." Zhu Xian'er was moved. It was so fierce just squeezing into the top 100, So how powerful would the top 10 be? Just like the North region's prodigy role, the ninth layer of the spiritual ocean tier could squeeze into the top 100, but what were the top 10? The difference between the spiritual pedestal tier wasn't just a little bit. In that case, this heaven cloud purple thunder was terrifying. Ling Han thought carefully and said, "The power of lightning is leaking out uncontrollably, which means that the lightning spirit is about to be born. If it really becomes an existence with consciousness, I'm afraid no one will be able to obtain it." Not to mention how terrifying such a thunder spirit's battle prowess was, just in terms of speed, how many people could catch up. Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier, but his speed could rival those in the deity transformation tier. The thunder spirit was a pure body of lightning, so how fast could its speed be? Perhaps only shattering void tier elites could capture it. Wait, Ling Han was startled. Zi Shuexian had definitely been in the shattering void tier all those years ago, so could this thunder spirit have been captured by her and suppressed here all this while? 10,000 years had passed, and the restriction had begun to weaken. Added with the change in the environment caused by the earthquake, which further weakened the restriction, Thundersnow finally broke free and began the final step of transformation. Could this really be the boundless mountain of the past? Ling Han was tempted. He still couldn't transform his body into lightning, but if he could refine the heaven cloud purple lightning, he would definitely be able to cultivate the thunderclap ninth heaven to great accomplishment, or at least small accomplishment. He would truly be able to cultivate it, and not be a dabbler like he was now. He was even a little excited to the point that his body was trembling. If that time really came, how terrifying would his battle prowess be? Perhaps he would really be able to completely surpass a major tier in battle. A flower blossom tier cultivator rivaling a deity transformation tier cultivator. This was truly like a myth. I'm only one step away from Body of Diamond, and also one step away from 30 flashes of Sword Chi. If I obtain this heaven cloud purple lightning and temper it, who knows, I might be able to attain Body of Diamond and form 30 flashes of Sword Chi. At that time, condensing ray, forming a spiritual infant, and refining my body with lightning would all be done in one go. Then, once I advance into the spiritual infant tier, I should be able to battle top-notch deity transformation tier elites. This was really inconceivable. Those who could surpass 5 stars in battle could be considered a super genius, and those who could surpass 10 stars would be at the level of heaven-defying geniuses like the Sword Emperor and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. But if Ling Han used his full battle prowess, he could now surpass 20 stars in battle. Of course, this was taking into account the 3 mystical powers, the Demon Birth Sword, the mysterious 3000, and the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Without any one of them, his battle prowess would drop by a few stars. However, if he could really fuse with this strange lightning, he would be able to possess battle prowess of over 20 stars with only his 3 great mystical powers unarmed. And this is enough to suppress that fierce woman, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, Ling Han mumbled. No matter what, he was a male chauvinist, and was absolutely unwilling to be suppressed by the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, I don't know what level this fierce woman is at now. Even if she is only the lowest level of a mortal spirit, I'm afraid she could suppress me with a single finger. Sigh. The path of suppressing this evil daughter-in-law is a long one, and I still have to search high and low. Ling Han was absent-minded for a while, then snapped his fingers and said, "Xian Er, you'd better stay here for now." Zhu Xian Er understood and nodded. She deliberately pretended that she wanted to whisper some secrets to Ling Han and pulled him into the dense forest. When Ling Han released his divine sense to take her into the Black Tower, she first kissed Ling Han on the cheek, and only then did she enter into the Black Tower. This girl. Ling Han shook his head. He had occasionally mentioned the matter of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to Zhu Xian'er, and she must have guessed that his absent-mindedness earlier was because he was thinking of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Zhu Xian'er's intelligence lay in the fact that she was obviously jealous, yet treated Ling Han with an even gentler attitude, making Ling Han also firmly remember her in his heart. Women are indeed transformed from enchantresses, always wanting to steal your heart, Ling Han said ruefully as he walked out of the forest. Nio is not transformed from an enchantress, Hu Nio said seriously with her hands on her hips. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly, then said to the rabbit, "Ruffian rabbit, the heaven cloud purple lightning is about to appear ahead, and the power of lightning is extremely dangerous. Do you still want to follow? If you die, I can only plant 2 dragon blood tyrant ginseng on your grave next year. Go, go, go. Uncle Rabbit will live for 100 years. Definitely not a short-lived rabbit." The rabbit brushed its little claws. "Aren't you already a few hundred years old?" Hu Nio asked curiously. "A very long life." The rabbit was depressed and said, "Uncle Rabbit said wrong. Can I live 10,000 years? Then you take care of your own life and death, and bear the consequences." Ling Han said with a smile. He and Hu Nio both cultivated the thunderclap ninth heaven and had considerable affinity with the power of lightning, far more resistant to the power of lightning than normal people. Besides, didn't he still have the Black Tower? The rabbit was disdainful. Didn't they know that the attribute of rabbits was to run fast? When it came to escaping, if Uncle Rabbit said second, who would dare say first? 2 people and 1 rabbit advanced, and the power of lightning enveloped the entire mountain peak. The purple lightning was extremely terrifying, darting everywhere and hitting trees and rocks, which all turned into ashes with Pa Ling Han stretched out a finger, and Z, absorbing the overflowing power of lightning. The 5 elements Chaos Lotus swayed, and the lotus root shone, guiding the power of lightning to flow throughout Ling Han's body, making his physique further transform towards a body of lightning. This power of lightning was insignificant, and the transformation was naturally ridiculously slow. However, Ling Han didn't mind. This could at most be considered an appetizer, and the main course was the heaven cloud purple lightning. As long as it didn't truly transform into a lightning spirit, then it could be eaten, but if it succeeded, then he'd better run. Hu Nio was even more freakish than Ling Han. She already had a body of lightning, and the power of lightning rushed into her body, making her giggle endlessly, as if she was being tickled. Different people had different fates. He obviously also cultivated the thunderclap ninth heaven, but why was the difference so great? Ling Han sighed, extremely envious of Hu Nio. Don't be envious. This girl's ancestor was definitely a supreme almighty being of the divine realm, with a bloodline inheritance and shocking abilities. Even Uncle Rabbit has to concede defeat, the rabbit said on the side. Ling Han gave an O and said, "You think Hu Nio's ancestor was some almighty being of the divine realm? Otherwise, tell Uncle Rabbit, how could there be someone who ascended to the flower blossom tier at 7 or 8 years old?" The rabbit said with certainty. Ling Han picked up the rabbit and said, "Seems like you understand the divine realm quite well. Tell me, how many levels are there among the divine beings?" Chapter 646. The rabbit rolled its eyes at Ling Han and said, "You think Uncle Rabbit is a god? How would I know without going to the divine realm?" "Then how do you know that Hu Nio's ancestor is a supreme being of the divine realm?" Ling Han asked. "Huske, if not a supreme being, how could she be so freakish?" The rabbit snorted. Ling Han shook his head, feeling that it wasn't Hu Nio's ancestor that was awesome, but she herself was awesome. The spirit base in her dantian was too terrifying. At least until now, Ling Han didn't feel a stronger pressure from others. Not in his previous life, and not in this life. Shattering void tier elites like Feng Puyun and the giant silver spider, existences at the peak of humanity couldn't even compare to a glance from that woman. The longer time passed, and the higher the tier, the more fearful Ling Han was of that human-shaped spirit base, feeling it more and more unfathomable. Ling Han looked at the cheerful Hu Nio, and only had one wish in his heart. Hu Nio could be so free forever. As they advanced halfway up the mountain, the power of lightning became stronger and stronger, and the rabbit had to circulate origin power to resist. Although it was a beast and had a strong physique, it couldn't withstand the violent bombardment of the power of lightning. Not to mention anything else, it wouldn't do it even if its snow-white rabbit fur was burnt. Ling Han and Hu Nio, on the other hand, were like fish in water. Though the power of lightning here was strong, it was not violent and could be easily absorbed. It was just like lightning spirit chi, except that it was even denser and had almost materialized. They obviously weren't the first to come here. Many people were in the process of climbing, and all opened origin power shields, each step difficult. No one dared to fly. The power of lightning in the sky was too violent, like the wrath of the nine heavens. Perhaps only deity transformation tier elites were qualified to force their way through, or else they could only take one step at a time and walk obediently on the ground. The people ahead walked slower and slower. After all, not many people had a thunder spirit base and had to use their own origin power to resist. This not only consumed origin power, but also physical strength. For those who didn't cultivate body arts, they could only take a few steps and rest. Ling Han quickly stopped in his tracks because a narrow path had appeared in front of him. However, someone had actually sat down and rested in this small path. If he wanted to cross over his head, he would inevitably be bombarded by the power of lightning, which was extremely dangerous. Hey, please take a few more steps forward or take a few steps back. Don't block the only way, Ling Han said. That was a man in his 30s. He was in the high level of the spiritual infant tier, possibly even reaching the peak of the spiritual infant tier. Though his chi and blood were exuberant, he was not as young as he appeared. After all, after breaking through to the flower blossom tier, the rate at which martial artists aged slowed down. Spiritual infant tier warriors had a lifespan of 500 years, and as long as one's true age was below 200 years old, it would be no different from being in their 30s. The man cast a sidelong glance at Ling Han and Hunyao, and could not help but reveal a look of disdain. He said disdainfully, "Mere flower blossom tier juniors dare to ask me to make way? TSK, TSK, TSK. You're going to be in deep trouble. Uncle Rabbit can guarantee you with my integrity." Rabbit immediately gloated. "Demon, demon rabbit." The man cried out in alarm. This rabbit could actually speak the human language. "Make way." Ling Han's expression also turned cold. The man no longer cared about the fact that the rabbit could speak the human language and stared at Ling Han again. He sneered and said, "You dare speak to me like this? Do you think you're tired of living?" "Uncle Rabbit, you're the one who thinks you're tired of living." The rabbit kept interrupting. Ling Han said indifferently, "As the saying goes, a good dog doesn't block the way." "Then I can only send a mangy dog like you flying with a kick. How dare you?" The man was furious and actually made the first move. With a wave of his hand, a black whip was already lashed out, coiling towards Ling Han's neck. He revealed a ruthless expression. As long as he was coiled by his whip, the terrifying origin power would burst forth, and he could instantly pluck off the other's head. Ling Han's gaze also shot out a cold light. Not only did this person block the way, he attacked to take his life. Truly vicious. Towards this kind of person, there was naturally no need to be merciful. Ling Han also made a move. Lightning twined around his hand, crackling as he grabbed the long whip with one move. Z. The power of lightning passed through the long whip and instantly passed towards the other.
Ah!
The man cried out in shock. The power of lightning passed through, causing his entire right arm to go numb and his 5 fingers to lose all feeling. He couldn't help but loosen his hand, and the whip fell. He hurriedly extended his left hand, wanting to grab the whip again. This was forged from flying cloud gold thread wrapped around blackwood vines, and was incomparably precious. Shoo! But the long whip moved like a spirit snake, shooting rapidly towards Ling Han's direction, and had already landed in his hand. "Return it to me," the man cried out. Ling Han rolled his eyes and said, "Is there something wrong with your brain? Brat, are you seeking your own death?" The man said darkly, "You speak as if you didn't want to kill me just now, and were just playing with me." Ling Han shook his head and brandished the long whip in the direction of the man. Because the body of the whip was entwined with metal, it became an excellent conductor for the power of lightning. Z. The whole whip turned white, densely interwoven with lightning, and ancient patterns flashed.
Fuck.
The man spat. This place was full of the power of lightning, which also doubled the battle prowess of thunder attribute martial artists, and a single strike could draw upon the power of lightning in the surroundings to amplify. Flower Blossom tier warriors could draw upon the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to amplify their attacks, but this place became a sea of lightning. Martial artists of the 5 elements couldn't borrow the corresponding spiritual chi and could only rely on their own power to battle, which naturally greatly affected their battle prowess. However, for thunder attribute martial artists, this place was equivalent to a paradise. The man could only flee backwards to avoid the strike. Ling Han followed up and lashed out with another whip. His battle prowess reached the peak of the spiritual infant tier, and added with the amplification of the power of lightning here, he naturally crushed any spiritual infant tier warrior, unless the other also had a thunder attribute spirit base. How would the man resist him? Ling Han advanced step by step, and the man retreated step by step. The long whip lashed out with pa-pa-pa sounds, and the power of lightning interweaved, extremely terrifying. The man's head was covered in cold sweat. The power of lightning here was terrifying, and it was like stepping into a swamp. Every step was difficult. One had to resist the turbulency of lightning, which was extremely taxing on both origin power and physical strength, so one would need to rest after walking for a while. But now, a whip was lashing madly on his head, not giving him any time to breathe at all. He could only run forward like a mad dog. He was as pathetic as one could imagine. Damn it, damn it. The man was extremely angry and humiliated. Brat, don't go too far. I'm a member of the Iron Tree Silver Flower Leaf family, and the ancestor is a heaven tier elite, respected by the whole world. Oh, I'm so scared. I can only kill you to avoid future trouble, Ling Han said with a smile, and the whip in his hand lashed out even more urgently. The man let out a shameful howl. As he walked, he was seen by many people in his pathetic state, and those pairs of strange gazes made him feel extremely ashamed and resentful. Chapter 647. They're going to fight, they're going to fight. The members of the Liu clan were all excited. They naturally all hoped that Ling Han would be defeated. Ling Han smiled casually and stepped into the air. There seemed to be an invisible flight of stairs in the sky, allowing him to ascend step by step until he arrived in the vast skies. On account of your seniority, I'll let you have 3 moves. He crooked his finger. Arrogant, Man Jing was so righteous that his white hair danced in the wind. He began to burn his chi and blood, deciding to fight with his utmost brilliance. He wanted to defeat this youngster, who didn't know how to be humble in an instant. Although it was indeed very impressive that Ling Han had advanced into the Shattering Void tier at such a young age, he still had to know that there would always be people better than him. His aura continued to increase and reached the battle prowess of 8 stars of Shattering Void tier, matching his cultivation level. Suppress. He flew out and charged towards Ling Han to suppress him. Ling Han neither dodged nor evaded, and allowed his opponent to attack him as he pleased. Paw. He was instantly struck in the chest by a palm. Hiss, this was called letting him have 3 moves? The corners of everyone's mouths twitched, and they practically didn't dare to believe their own eyes. The so-called letting him have a few moves meant that he wouldn't take the initiative to counterattack. What he should block still had to be blocked, and what he should dodge still had to be dodged. It definitely didn't mean that he wouldn't dodge, evade, or parry and forcefully take the blow. Shattering Void tier cultivators didn't die, because if they wanted to flee, there was basically no one who could stop them. But if you acted so recklessly, then Shattering Void tier cultivators would also die very quickly. One move and he would be insta-killed, definitely.
Ah.
Yet Man Jing screamed in pain. His arms trembled and showed an inconceivable twist. That was because his bones had been dislocated.
What?
Pa. Man Jing activated his origin power and reset the dislocated bones. His face twitched, and his expression was filled with disbelief. How could this be possible? His opponent had taken the force of his palm strike, and not only was he completely fine, he had even dislocated his own arm. This defense was nature-defying. 2 more moves, Ling Han said calmly. There was absolute silence, and only the sound of heavy breathing and the reverberation of Ling Han's words could be heard. Even the 7 kings were indescribably shocked. This brat's physique seems to have become stronger again. Previously, it was already at the level of level 10 rare metal, then wouldn't it have advanced into godly metal now? Fuck, in this world. Who else could kill him? Forget about killing. Can anyone even hurt him? Man Jingyi's face was filled with bitterness. Even if he could defeat Ling Han, so what? There wasn't the slightest bit of brilliance. How could there be such a freak? It was no wonder that Ling Han would be arranged by the Purple Moon Empire to be in the highest position. Merely based on that defensive power, who would dare to be unconvinced? He took a deep breath. Now, there was no way out. He could only hope that Ling Han's defensive power could not possibly be so awesome all the time so that he could recover a little and at least leave some face. After accumulating for a full 3 breaths, he held back and unleashed a powerful move. Azure River's water flow, break through 10,000 miles. Hung. He drew upon the water element of heaven and earth and turned it into a black river that charged towards Ling Han. Every drop of river water was condensed from pure origin power and was as heavy as a mountain. If this black river hit solidly, then even an elite in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier would be directly killed. Ling Han still stood in the air with his hands behind his back, without any intention of dodging. Hey, you want to take this move head-on? Clear Sun King drew in a cold breath. His battle prowess could definitely kill Man Jingyi in a second, but he definitely didn't dare to take a powerful move from the opponent head-on. With godly metal-level defense, you can be so willful. Heavenly Astral King sighed. Physique was too difficult to cultivate. Although they also had some small accomplishments, they only reached the level of Heaven tier and couldn't cross the final step at all. Hung, the Black River struck and heavily hit Ling Han's body, instantly drowning him. Amidst the heavy sound, the Black River poured down, charging towards the heaven-splitting platform, which frightened countless people. Shattering Void tier, and a powerful move of the 8th layer at that. Even if most Shattering Void tier elites took it head-on, they would only be insta-killed. Let me. Flame King's figure flashed, and he already appeared in front of the Black River. He stretched out his hand, and Hong. Flames rose, instantly burning this Black River into ashes. He originally had battle prowess of 15 stars of Shattering Void tier, and now, with the supportive power of the nation, his battle prowess soared to 18 stars, so dispelling a powerful move of 8 stars of Shattering Void tier was naturally a piece of cake. The disaster was resolved, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't pay attention to Flame King, for the latter being able to be so powerful was naturally within their expectations. The key was Ling Han, who took this move head-on. Was he heavily injured, or was he completely unscathed like before? The Black River completely dispersed, and Ling Han could be seen standing proudly, the chi and blood all over his body soaring to the skies like a cauldron that could burn the heavens. This freak, Liu Clan's ancestor, shivered. No, he had to immediately apologize to Ling Han. This kind of person was really terrifying, and if he bore a grudge, then the Liu clan would definitely be done for. Not to mention anything else, and merely in terms of living longer, he still wouldn't be Ling Han's match. There's still one more move, Ling Han said with a smile, full of energy. Everyone came to a sudden realization. It wasn't that Ling Han was arrogant, but rather that he was indeed too strong. With such a physique, not to mention 3 moves, even if it was 300 moves, so what? Man Jingyi immediately gave up. He had already used his strongest move, but still couldn't even harm a single hair on Ling Han's head, so what use would one more move have? No need. I admit defeat, he said, his heart filled with bitterness. In his life, it wasn't that he hadn't been defeated before, but within the same cultivation level, his opponent had forced him to raise his hands and surrender without even using a single move. This was the only time to be able to rush up to the Shattering Void tier, especially one who had reached the summit a few hundred years ago. What kind of genius was that? Man Jingyi naturally had his own pride, but now, he had no choice but to concede to his old age. This era no longer belonged to him. "Thank you for letting me win," Ling Han said calmly. He didn't act overbearingly and refused to let Man Jingyi go. Man Jingyi turned around dejectedly and returned to his own seat. However, at this time no one gave him a second look. Instead, all their attention was focused on Ling Han. This was a super new star. What? He's Ling Han, that heaven-grade alchemist. I really never thought that there would actually be such a rare genius in this world. Not only has he reached the pinnacle in alchemy, but he is also so terrifying in martial arts. In the future, he will definitely become one of the rulers of this world. Hee. If His Majesty succeeds in splitting open the skies, we will all become subjects of the immortal level. At that time, we will receive the resources of the immortal realm to cultivate, and we may not necessarily lose to him. Exactly. The majority of people were certain of Ling Han's abilities, but there were also some who were narrow-minded and were filled with dissatisfaction towards Ling Han. However, now that Ling Han sat there again, no one had any objections. "If you're dissatisfied, then come at me with 3 moves." The Liu clan's ancestor hurriedly led the younger generation over and apologized to Ling Han. Meanwhile, those youngsters finally knew that there was always someone better than them, and all of them broke out in a cold sweat. With Ling Han's current strength, even if he killed them all, would the ancestor dare to have any objections? Chapter 648. Pung, pung, pung. The fierce battle began. Lightning flashed, causing the others to retreat one after another. Only Hunyo was still able to stand where she was. The waves of lightning surged past, but did not affect her in the slightest. How could Zhao Chaoheng possibly dare to let Ling Han have 3 moves? If he did so, he would fall into an absolutely disadvantageous situation. Thus, he could not be bothered with the embarrassment of losing face. His fists rained down on that dragon elephant. Is this the Earth Dragon Sect's War Elephant Fist? He was quite knowledgeable and immediately recognized the War Elephant Fist. This was not the Earth Dragon Sect's most powerful technique. There were many disciples who knew it, so it was not strange for Zhao Chaoheng to be able to recognize it. Ling Han did not reply. Since they had already exchanged blows, defeating the other party was the most effective response. Zhao Chaoheng harumphed. Although he no longer dared to underestimate Ling Han, he was not afraid of Ling Han. Brandishing his fists, his combat prowess was not the slightest bit weak, allowing him to fight evenly with Ling Han. His cultivation level was in the 9th layer of the spiritual infant tier, and he had stayed in this cultivation level for a very, very long time, tempering his cultivation level to an incredibly pure level. Therefore, with the advantage of a great realm, he was not the slightest bit weaker than Ling Han. But this made him even more speechless, because his battle prowess should definitely be at the peak of the spiritual infant tier, but now, a flower blossom tier cultivator was able to match him, which shocked him. It was practically inconceivable. "Junior, are you a disciple of the Earth Dragon Sect?" he barked. If he was, then he just wanted to say a few words of courtesy. He didn't want to continue fighting. After all, the Earth Dragon Sect was even more powerful than a Deva-level power. So, what if Li Yuanmiang was beaten up so badly? No, Ling Han said with a smile. Guess again. Guess your sister. Zhao Chaoheng didn't waste any more words, only continuing to send out punches. He planned to stop the battle only after he had obtained an absolute advantage. This way, he wouldn't offend Ling Han, and he would also be able to preserve his face. As for Li Yuanminko, it had nothing to do with him in the first place. It was already good enough that he was willing to help. The two of them fought, and it was difficult to determine the victor. Zhao Chaoheng wanted to end the battle quickly, so he immediately took out a long saber, the blade of which was densely covered with vein-like patterns. This was the spirit artifact that he had cultivated with his life. It was originally a rank 7 refined weapon, but after dozens of years of nurturing, it had now been promoted to a spirit artifact. This was a spirit weapon that he had nurtured himself. Even if the two spirit weapons were exactly the same, in his hands, This blue thunder saber would be able to unleash even greater power. It was very simple. It was most suitable for him. Ling Han couldn't help but reveal a strange smile. You really want to compete with me in spirit artifacts? With the saber in hand, Zhao Chaoheng's confidence soared. It was also a level 7 spirit artifact, but this green thunder saber of his could unleash 100%, or even 120% of its power. If he were to use a spirit weapon that didn't belong to him, he would only be able to display 60 to 70% of its power at most. Ling Han's right hand shook, and the demon birth sword was already unleashed. Wung, wung, wung. 3 vein-like patterns lit up, and instantly, a terrifying murderous aura circulated. This was a level 10 spirit tool, and even if Ling Han couldn't unleash its full power, its level was there for all to see, so how could it be inferior to a level 7 spirit tool? What spirit tool is this? Zhao Chaoheng's expression changed in shock. As a descendant of a heaven-tier clan, his judgment naturally wouldn't be bad, and he instantly saw the extraordinariness of the demon birth sword. Do you still want to fight? Ling Han shook the sword and said with a smile, perhaps that saber of yours will be cut in half by me. Zhao Chaoheng immediately looked hesitant. If Ling Han was only a normal flower blossom tier cultivator, then even if he wielded a level 10 spirit tool, he wouldn't be afraid, because he wouldn't even be touched by the latter's sword. However, Ling Han's battle prowess was enough to match his, and that would be troublesome. The blue thunder saber was a treasured saber that he had nurtured for several tens of years. Even if it was only a small scratch, his heart would ache. No more fighting. He decided that safety was the first priority. After all, he didn't have any deep friendship with Li Yuanming. However, after some thought, he still said, young man, Li Yuanming is a descendant of the Li clan, and the ancestor of the Li clan is even a heaven-tier cultivator. It's best that you don't go overboard. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I won't go overboard. I only want to kill him. Zhao Chaoheng's expression stiffened. If this wasn't going overboard, then what was? However, he had already done what he could and should have done, so there was absolutely no reason for him to fight to the death with Ling Han for the sake of Li Yuanming. After all, he wasn't his brother-in-law. Li Yuanming was forced to retreat continuously and suddenly turned around to run. He didn't want to die at all. Ling Han didn't chase after him and merely drew out the sunset bow and knocked an arrow. Shio! The sharp arrow shot out, carrying lightning and instantly accelerating to the extreme. Pooh! It shot into Li Yuanming's heart from the back, and with a pu, it shot out again, stabbing into the hard mountain rock. Li Yuanming staggered a few more steps before collapsing onto the ground with a loud bang. Fresh blood seeped out, forming a pool of blood under his body. His face was filled with regret. There wasn't any mortal enmity between the two of them, and he was merely blocking the way. If he hadn't been so rude and unreasonable and then used his identity as a member of the Li clan to try and take Ling Han's life, would there be such an outcome? However, it was useless no matter how much he regretted it. His eyes were wide open in unwillingness, but there was no longer any anger. Ling Han walked over and put away the sharp arrow. This was forged from level 7 rare metal, and if one arrow had to be used up for each shot, probably only the wealth of a shattering void tier elite would be able to support it. Zhao Chaoheng looked at Ling Han's back and suddenly said, young man, how should I address you? Ling Han turned around to look at him and said, Ling Han. Ling Han. Zhao Chaoheng nodded and said, I will remember this name. Young man, you are indeed very strong. Even if I have cultivated for a few dozen more years than you, and am a whole tier higher than you in terms of cultivation level, I can only fight you to a draw. However, there are really too many geniuses in this generation. My Zhao clan has a super genius named Ziyuan. He is only 23 years old this year, and is already in the second layer of the spiritual infant tier. His battle prowess is even stronger than mine. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, if there's a chance, I can spar with him. Zhao Chaoheng nodded, and at the same time, felt incredibly rueful. His talent and strength could be ranked among the top in any period of 10,000 years, but this era ushered in a super flourishing age of martial art, as if it was about to release all the accumulation of 10,000 years. Not only did the strength of the entire martial art industry see a great increase, the younger generation also welcomed the blossoming of 100 flowers. Geniuses from all walks of life appeared frequently, and they easily trampled on the older generation. He was born at the wrong time. How good would it be if he could be born 50 years later? Ling Han continued to advance. Hunyo held his hand and ate snacks as she did so. Meanwhile, Rabbit followed on the other side. It had already felt a great pressure, and the power of lightning was becoming more and more terrifying. We're almost there. Ling Han looked ahead and revealed an expression of joy. The heaven cloud purple lightning was just ahead, and after fusing with it, he would be able to cultivate a true body of lightning. Ahead, a crowd appeared, and there was also a gigantic pool of lightning. Chapter 649. A Beautiful Romance. This pool of lightning was at least 30 meters in circumference, and at the other end was a cave. Half of the cave entrance had collapsed, giving off a kind of shabby feeling. The pool of lightning surged, rolling with terrifying divine lightning, and the scene was astonishing. There were many people watching in the surroundings, and some even wanted to barge in and enter that cave, but they immediately gave up after a try. They were bombarded by lightning until their bodies were covered in scorch marks, looking extremely miserable. Ling Han said, "The power of this pool of lightning is most likely at the deity transformation tier." Although the current younger generation was rising very fiercely, even geniuses like Small Saber King and Lang Yatian, who could be classified as the young generation, hadn't crossed into the deity transformation tier, let alone others. However, it didn't matter if their tier wasn't up to par. They could use treasures to make up for it. Ling Han saw someone take out an umbrella, open it, and enter the pool of lightning. The lightning bombarded, but this umbrella emitted a bright light, turning into a shield that blocked all the lightning. It was a woman, beautiful and moving, with a graceful figure. Stepping on the lightning waves, she was as elegant as a fairy, enchanting people. Guangyang Sex Wenren Qian Qian. What? I've never heard of her. Hee, Fairy Wenren is very low-key, but her talent is astonishing, and her strength is extremely powerful. Even she is as beautiful as a fairy, not inferior to the Wang clan's Pearl or the Hu clan's Beauty. Whether she's strong or not is still unknown, but she's really pretty. Hee, you can have her if you're pretty. Fairy Wenren said that as long as it's a battle of the same tier, or a battle of the same age, a man who can defeat her is qualified to be her future husband. Really? Of course it's true. However, she didn't say that if you win, you'll definitely be able to marry her, just that you have this qualification. Even so, many people were eager to give it a try. This Wenren Qian Qian was really so beautiful that it made people's hearts tremble. Once they closed their eyes, all they could see was her graceful figure, the absolutely beautiful and elegant scene of her stepping on the lightning pool. It couldn't be erased at all. I advise you all to give up. Fairy Wenren has already been taken by Jia Ming. Unless you think you can compete with Jia Ming, otherwise, you'd better stop worrying. Jia Ming. Hearing this name, many people revealed astonished expressions. This was the most talented genius that had obtained the qualification to directly enter the Restore Heaven Academy, and he had only made a name for himself in the last 2 years. Previously, he had been painstakingly cultivating in the depths of the savage mountains, fighting demonic beasts, and had never appeared in the world. It was precisely because of this that Jia Ming's murderous nature was exceedingly great. His attacks were cruel, and he never knew how to show mercy. In the 2 years since he'd returned, it was unknown how many geniuses had died at his hands, and some were even disciples of great clans and powers, yet he'd always been safe and sound. Jia Ming was a disciple of the Earth Dragon sect. Who would dare to touch a disciple of one of the 5 great ancient sects? Moreover, Jia Ming had also killed in a one-on-one battle, which could be said to be rather fair. which force would dare to suppress him? This was the benefit of having a great background. Otherwise, a person like Jia Ming, who slaughtered without fear, would have long since been secretly slaughtered by the older generation many times over. No one dared to open their mouths and speak nonsense. Jia Ming was a person who would kill and injure people with a single word of disagreement. He had absolutely no scruples, and if he knew that they were lusting after Wenren Qian behind his back, he would hunt them down. He couldn't afford to offend this fiend. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Come, some people have already gone in. The heaven cloud purple thunder should be in the cave, and this pool of lightning is only a bit of power that has overflowed." Rabbit expressed his agreement. "Let's go, go, go." Hunyo pulled Ling Han's hand and walked towards the pool of lightning, completely unconcerned. Ling Han stepped out, but the thunderclap ninth heaven was already in operation, and his body was emitting lightning. He couldn't possibly resist the lightning of the deity transformation tier, but these lightning weren't the attacks of anyone. He used lightning to counter lightning and only hoped to safely pass through, which greatly reduced the difficulty. Unexpectedly, Hunyo's body turned into a bottomless pit, and when the lightning struck, it was easily absorbed by her, causing Ling Han to stare wide-eyed. This was lightning of the deity transformation tier. Not to mention Ling Han. Even small Saber King would tremble with fear if he came, but Hunyo, on the other hand, didn't refuse anything and absorbed it cleanly. Seeing this, Rabbit hurriedly jumped over. Behind Hunyo, a small path appeared in the pool of lightning. It was as if a supreme being had forcefully carved out a safe zone, but as Hunyo moved further away, this small path was also quickly submerged by lightning and once again became a complete pool of lightning. In the surroundings, everyone couldn't believe it, but their gazes were fixed on Ling Han, obviously thinking that such an action was done by Ling Han. Who would suspect a little girl of only 7 or 8 years old, or a large white rabbit? Under Hunyo's lead, Ling Han quickly passed through the pool of lightning and arrived at the entrance of a cave. Still not full. Hunyo still hadn't had enough, and turned back to look at the pool of lightning behind. Ling Han smiled and said, "Then you can go absorb some more lightning power." "Forget it. Help Nyo's Ling Han find the heaven cloud purple thunder first," Hunyo said very sensibly. This little girl was truly more and more likable. Hee, Nyo is so obedient. Ling Han must marry Nyo in the future. The little girl immediately began to haggle. The two of them walked into the cave, and Rabbit followed behind without any rights, because as long as it walked side by side, it would be bitten by Hunyo, saying that it was in a way, so Uncle Rabbit could only follow behind obediently. On the other hand, it was displeased, thinking that it was a spiritual infant tier elite, so why did it have to follow behind a flower blossom tier human brat? The entrance to the cave wasn't big and it was shabby, but after walking inside for a while, it suddenly opened up and became extremely spacious, and the deeper they went, the bigger the space became. That's... Ling Han's gaze swept over, and his figure had already leaped over. There was a ruin ahead that used to be a building, but now only a foundation was left. There were dilapidated walls all around, and who knew how many years ago it had been. Clear Harmony Palace Hall? Ling Han mumbled. He walked around and actually found a broken plaque in the ruins. However, there was only one word left on it. Peace. It must be Qinghe Palace Hall. Ling Han was completely certain that this was the Clear Harmony Palace Hall that Zi Shuexian had spoken of. This lightning, this ancient site, this character, there could not be such a coincidence in this world. After 10,000 years, there had indeed been great changes. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If it weren't for the earthquake and the imminent birth of the Thunder Spirit, would he have been able to discover this place? This mountain was very big, and the inside was basically hollowed out. Therefore, the space inside was also very big. This Clear Harmony Hall was not built at the end of the cave, and there was still a lot of space behind it. Ling Han hesitated. Was the thing that Zi Shuexian had left behind actually in the Clear Harmony Palace Hall, or was it in the depths of a cave? That was because Zishuesian's message had only contained the words infinite boundless mountain and clear he palace, without any detailed explanation. Ling Han thought for a long time and decided to search the ruins of the Clear Harmony Palace Hall. Chapter 650. Since Zishuesian mentioned the Clear Harmony Palace Hall, then this should have played a crucial role. Otherwise, Ling Han could very well turn the boundless mountain upside down. For an elite of the flower blossom tier, flattening a mountain was really not a difficult task. Ling Han pushed out a palm, and destructive sword chi swept out. Poo, piu, piu, the bricks on the ground all turned into powder. Hu Niu pouted, and with a hu, she blew out a gust of wind, blowing away all the dust. Ling Han destroyed again, and Hu Niu cleaned again. Very soon, the entire ruins of the Clear Harmony Palace Hall no longer existed, and only a rugged mountain rock remained. However, there was one brick that was not bad. Ling Han smiled. It seemed that he had guessed correctly. The thing that Zishuesian had left behind might be hidden underneath. He grabbed that brick and lifted it, but discovered that this brick was actually extremely heavy. He could not move it no matter what. He could not help but feel competitive and shouted loudly, "Rise!" Origin power and brute force were unleashed together, exploding with a shocking power. However, what was embarrassing was that the brick still did not move in the slightest, as if it had become one with the mountain rock. Ling Han could not help but feel annoyed, and directly began to destroy the nearby rocks, bypassing this brick. Poo, piu, piu. He destroyed some of the mountain rocks, but soon discovered that he could only dig half a foot into the ground, and could not dig any further. This mountain rock was not the slightest bit inferior to that brick, and at least he could do nothing about it. Ling Han drew out the demon birth sword, and sliced at the brick. This time, there was finally some effect, and a shallow scar appeared on the brick. However, how long would he have to cut until? Ling Han decided to attack, with 10,000 techniques returned to 1. He had now condensed a fake ray, and 29 flashes of sword chi combined with 10,000 techniques returned to 1, added with the sharpness of the demon birth sword. The destructive power should be extremely terrifying. Let Niu do it. Hu Niu pounced first, shouting loudly. Damn rock, you actually dare not obediently split open. Niu is very angry. Niu will bite you to pieces. Ka-cha, ka-cha, she bit, and a terrifying thing happened. The rock shattered in response to her teeth. Hu Niu, your teeth have become more powerful again. Ling Han exclaimed. Previously, though Hu Niu's little white teeth were domineering, they were definitely not this shocking. Hee. After absorbing some lightning, Niu has become more powerful, Hu Niu said proudly, and began to chew again. Very soon, she had bitten out a hole the size of a human face on the stone brick, and her whole face was buried in it. No wonder Uncle Rabbit's butt is getting more and more painful. Rabbit couldn't help but touch his butt, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Ling Han swept a glance over it and said, You're also a freak. You've been bitten so many times by Hu Niu, and still haven't lost a piece of flesh. You're definitely the first. That's right. Rabbit couldn't help but be immensely pleased with himself. Lord Rabbit's ancestor was a prodigy of a generation and could be called the emperor among demons, invincible in his era. Under the influence of his bloodline, Lord Rabbit is naturally monstrous. As she spoke, Hu Niu's whole body was buried in the hole that she had bitten out of the stone brick. Then, with a pew, her little feet that were exposed outside suddenly disappeared. Ling Han Niu fell down, Hu Niu said delicately. The little girl only bit out a hole that was about the size of her body, but it didn't matter. After reaching the flower blossom tier, couldn't one's bones be twisted? Ling Han compressed his bones with great power, and instantly, every bone made a chong-chong sound, as if they were beating a drum. It couldn't be helped. He cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and the toughness of his bones was equivalent to rare metal of the same level. It was still a bit difficult to make them change shape. He elongated his body and became thinner, then slid down the hole that Hu Niu had bitten out. Rabbit had a slender figure, and had long since jumped down. Out of Ling Han's expectations, he had thought that there was a secret chamber below, leaving behind Zi Shuexian's belongings all those years ago, but who would have thought that it was actually a passageway? It was pitch black ahead, and he didn't know where it led. Really, isn't it just leaving behind some letters and things like that? Do you have to make it so complicated? Ling Han ridiculed as he advanced along the passageway. He looked carefully and saw that the walls on all four sides of the passageway, as well as the bottom, all had vein-like patterns. They were of an extremely high level, at least surpassing the level of his last life. This should have been set up by Zi Shuexian after she advanced into the Shattering Void tier. No wonder I couldn't destroy the mountain rock previously. It was refined by a great elite of the Shattering Void tier, so how could it be something that I can destroy now? However, Hunyo's teeth are really getting more and more powerful, Ling Han sighed ruefully. The little girl's special ability was continuously being displayed, and it was becoming more and more powerful. In the past, her stomach was like a bottomless pit, and that was only eating some food, and there was still an end to it. But now, she could even easily absorb the power of lightning on the level of the deity transformation tier. In the past, her teeth were sharp, and she could bite out the destructive power of 20 stars of the flower blossom tier when she was in the spiritual pedestal tier, but that was only a gap of one tier. But now, she could even bite through a cave abode set up by a great elite of the Shattering Void tier. Even if it had been over 10,000 years, and the effect was completely incomparable to what it had been in the past, Ling Han had expended so much effort to slash out a crack. With such a comparison, Hunyo's freakishness could be seen. Yet Ling Han was worried. The little girl was getting stronger and stronger. Could it be because that human-shaped spirit base in his dantian had awakened? He completely didn't think that it was a spirit base, but rather a spiritual body that possessed its own consciousness. Just thinking about how Hunyo could one day suddenly become another person and become a complete stranger made Ling Han shudder with fear, and even more pained. Hunyo sniffed with her little nose, clapped her hands, and said, Ling Han, there's a fragrant smell ahead." Ling Han smiled and forcibly dispelled his worries. He caught up with her with large strides and said, "Your nose is really sharp." "That's right, Nyo is the most amazing." The passageway soon came to an end, and a wall appeared in front of them. It was very wide and very tall, and the wall was divided into countless small squares. On each small square was painted a human face. There were men and women, old and young, and there were as many as 999 of them. And on the side of the wall, there was a small pool of lightning. A lotus actually grew out of the pool of lightning. The lotus had already borne fruit, but what it nurtured was not a lotus head, but a round fruit the size of a palm, which was currently flashing and emitting a purple light. The fragrance was emitted from that fruit. This pool of lightning was almost dried up, and one could clearly see the roots of the lotus rooted in the bottom of the pool of lightning, each root showing a purplish-red color. "Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder," Ling Han exclaimed. As expected, the Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder had evolved over a long period of time, and now had reached the crucial moment of transforming into a spirit. The fruit that the lotus bore was the Thunder Spirit. As long as it matured, the fruit would open, and the Thunder Spirit would be born. From then on, it would be free and unfettered between heaven and earth, becoming a true living being. But now, the Thunder Spirit had formed a fruit of Tao, and it was precisely the time when its defense was at its weakest. Plucking it and consuming it would allow one to obtain the fortune of heaven and earth, and obtain unimaginable benefits. This was born from heaven and earth, and the nourishment was unimaginable. Even an elite of the Shattering Void tier would be tempted. Ling Han was also tempted, and temporarily forgot about the matter of that wall, focusing only on that Thunder Lotus. Pung, 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 but the sound of footsteps was heard from behind. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.